How you doing, Nick? Hey, Bob.
There.
How are you?
Testing. There we go. Now we have audio.
Not much. You got this Jim spot?
No, he's
Not anymore.
done right now.
Todd. The problem, I heard you were taking a look at my prop before I got it.
Yeah. Yeah, I made sure it was okay.
Scott calls me. He goes, "Yeah, Tom was just sitting here checking out your prop." I'm like, "How did you get the first look at it?"
No.
That's the heaviest damn prop I've ever picked up.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the thing's heavy.
19 and a half diameter, 17 pitch. It's huge, but it's a Bravo 2. So they're like, huh? 4-blade. Yeah, that's what I went from a 3 to buy a 4 because
Oh, is it heavy?
I couldn't cruise under 3,800 RPM. I'd come off plane. So with the 4-blade now, at least they get down to about 3,500, 3,600, and they're like, yeah, Scott's like, you'll be
I
fine.
guess you don't hear it as much, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that should push it good.
You want in on this one? What is it? Flash and
No, don't let it hear it. Stop.
First time it was the,
Did you win?
There's what, 3 slots left.
Good.
40. Yeah.
Right on.
You want these furnace in or keep trying?
What do you got left? I'll sell it.
Oh, the cell phone holder. That was the other thing.
Yeah, I got
Look how like melted it got to the glass.
Yeah. I figured you wanted that.
Yeah, it'd be handy. I think this one's actually broke, but I can still wedge the phone in it.
Yeah.
And so it works as a holder.
right?
That's what I used to use to stream off of.
Yeah.
I don't know if it works or not. He was up there when I take the windshield off. I was like, yeah, maybe he wants this.
Taking it. So the windshield, you have a buyer? You think you'll get a buyer on that? Or
It's scrapping it.
oh, you're scrapping it. Okay.
I got to take it off the boat to get the aluminum.
Sure. That makes more sense. I'm like, wait, half of it was wiped off the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That aluminum just gets scrapped.
When I put that prop on, I pressed hard down and low on my trim tabs, and they did not move at all. No yield.
Then the pumps are good.
The rams are
The
good.
rams are good.
Yeah, so it's probably the pump itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
The pump's still in there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's a Bennett. What is? Yeah, Bennett system.
If the pump's still in there, I'll get the pump off. You ain't getting a wire here. That's,
Oh, you're saying on my boat? Yeah, whatever pump was in there was still in there. So
yeah, I'll get it out and get it to you.
okay. Yeah, I might do it.
Yeah, well, you got a.
Yeah, well, I operate the same, it's either get power, pump one way, get power, get pump.
Right. It just alternates the pump flow. I see we have a viewer online. If you're listening in, could you put a comment in the comment section to let me know you can hear us clearly before we get started? Last time I forgot to turn the mic on.
Yeah? Yeah.
RJ, one spot.
Yeah.
No.
It's a math thing I need.
Again, checking if you can hear me for the viewer online. Okay, thank you, Sam. Last time I forgot to turn the mic on, and it was like, oops, we missed it for the first 40 minutes of the meeting. What's that?
Yeah.
No, last meeting, I forgot to turn the microphone on. So you could see the video, but people were messaging like, hey, we can't hear you. Today I remember to do that.
That's not my job.
Finally got number one.
Hey, Francis, I got a
Finally got number one.
I got a
All right, I'm gonna give us a few more minutes just because I think there's a couple people running behind, but we'll get started real soon. They got going on here. Okay.
Well, Jason, Josh can try to check out of this one. Yeah.
What's Bradley's last name?
Person, P-E-R-S-S.
Oh,
It don't matter, Jim.
I got too many check.
that's me. Come on.
Okay. Bradley's got 2 more raffles going on the jackpot side. Jim's, I think, filled up for that one, right? The pull tab?
Yeah, that one's still.
Okay, good. So Bradley's got one $40 gift certificate to Custom Creations, as well as 2 additional spoons. And then a second one, a whole bunch of salmon flies and a $20 gift card. Hammer Time flies.
How much are they?
One is $5 a line, the other's $10 a line, depending on the 2.
No, you cannot get in.
Him? Yeah.
Sit your ass down.
Lose, you lose.
I got this one. Well, then you don't need it, give it here. Who's that?
All right, membership's going around. I'm going to get us going because we have a lot going on. First, we had unfortunately a little bit of rough water the last couple weeks. Chris Steinwall, which is Lonnie Steinwall's wife, passed away after a pretty long battle in the hospital. Her services were just this last week. And then Danielle Rasmussen, Mark's wife, also passed away. Jim, I think that was about 3 weeks ago, 3.5 weeks ago. I don't know if there's anyone else of note, but just please keep those 2 in mind for sure. With both of them, Jim, do you want to share what the board did?
Well, actually, it was a scholarship and grant
Yeah.
committee. They approved to donate $250 to each one. So what they're doing is for, in memory of Lonnie's wife, Chris, they're gonna donate $200 to the payouts for the shore division and reimburse Lonnie $50 for his ticket this year. And the same thing with, Danielle Rasmussen, they're, in memory of her, they're gonna donate $200 to the kayak division and offset Mark's ticket. However, I just found out today that Mark, we're gonna prolong his ticket into the 2026.
Because he already bought
Because,
one.
no, the family is going out of town for a memorial.
Oh.
So, sure, he won't be here.
Understood.
So that was through, Bob and his committee through the scholarship and grants. They approved to do that. I think it was a very good choice to, both of these anglers have been very active in the community, promoting a couple of really tough divisions, one being the shore and one being the kayak. Those are really tough sales for any organization, so very well done, Bob and crew, for approving that, and I know it means a lot to both of them guys that we thought of them in this time, so both of them were way too young.
Yeah.
I think Chris was 60 and Danielle was 41, so way too young. So our thoughts and prayers are with the family.
I will say, oh, go ahead.
In addition to that, we also just approved $500 for trying to think of it.
For when you kill me.
Where the vets go to Washington.
Oh, the honor flight?
Honor flight.
Yeah, honor flight.
So we're sponsoring one person for that.
That's awesome. My wife just took one of our neighbors, Pete Luxenhofer, last year, and that was quite a moment for him. It's amazing what all they do and see in the course of a day to get back. And then that welcoming back, if you haven't been to Milwaukee to the airport for that welcome back in the main atrium, there must have been 3,000 people lined up with a color guard coming in.
Easy.
Yeah, easily. That place is packed.
Yeah, I gotta thank Jason Buckman. He's the one that
Bringing it up.
brought that up.
Yeah.
I will say this, Lonnie called me today and said, hey, did you see what the club did for me, for my wife? I said, yeah, I saw it. He goes, I didn't know people cared that much. So he's like, he told me, I started crying when I saw it.
We're a community, we're a fraternity. Some of us have a little rough edges, but we still care for each other. I was looking past you, but the guy playing with
The new people back there.
no, the guy playing with my big prop. Oh, all right. Speaking of new people, first of all, before Mike jumps into the membership count, we have some new people, new guests here. So, who's new today, or who's visiting in? We could get some introductions around the room. Yeah.
You fish
Camino's Auto, sponsor for the shore division. Yeah, he was the first spot the fish was located at this year.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
I was over there picking it up from there.
And by the way, he does fish.
You fish boat or shore? Both. Both? Okay.
Yeah, he stops up on Douglas Avenue. And then, was it in the back?
My name's Jeff. I went fishing with Josh this weekend, and fishing has no boundaries, and he told me I should come check this out.
Yeah.
So there I am.
We'll get a little bit more about that later.
My name is Mike Brown. I'm from Franklin. I joined last year, but this is the first meeting that I've made it to.
Awesome. Welcome. Yeah. Any other Southern speakers?
I'm paying for the gas and another boat.
Oh,
God bless you.
It's Jeff Nelson. It's Salmon 10, I think. It is.
okay. What's the name of your boat, out of curiosity? No? Okay.
Dale is not. He's
Driving.
yeah,
Milwaukee,
driving
probably.
tonight.
He's
So.
maintaining over.
Yes.
You maintaining the boat for me?
Yeah. We'll get yes. We'll get into that, but yes. Over. Mike, how are we doing on membership?
First, let me thank those captains that got their registrations for the jackpot cruise in earlier than the couple of days before. I didn't have to stay up all night and run those things. I appreciate it. You two newbies here, you have your membership forms. If not, I've got them here and appreciate you.
Welcome you to join.
If you'd like to join the
You're
club.
already done?
Yeah.
I agree, you did.
Yeah,
He already did it.
He's all right. He's good already. That's it. How many of you captains here have crews that don't typically come to our club meetings? All right. The reason I ask that is, those of you that are here typically get involved at the different events and so forth, but membership, the different activities rely on the membership to support them. So if you can encourage your crews, especially those that don't show up here, to get a hold of Jim to work for Samarama or Bradley to help out with Jackpot, it's definitely appreciated. I mean, that's what membership's all about. It's more than just filling out a form and going fishing a couple of times during the summer. So appreciate it if you would push them in that direction. Likewise, if you've got people that you take fishing that aren't necessarily just signed up for Jackpot, but go fishing with you that aren't members of the club, try to get them to get online, fill out an application form, send it in, and let's try to hit over 200 members this year, okay? We're at about 145. I think it's doable with some work. The board has asked that we might be sending out letters to members from last year that did not renew. In order to do that, I'd like to get about 2 more people to help me with folding and stuffing and addressing envelopes and so forth. So if you're at all interested in helping to boost the membership by helping me get the mail out, stop by and see me before you go home tonight, okay?
Do we have to go to your house?
Pardon?
Do we have to do it from your house? Or what do you do it from?
No, I'll do my best to split it up if we're gonna do something like that. I can give you a batch of letters, a batch of envelopes, and a bunch of labels. If I get labels printed, somebody promised to do that for me. And then, you can just work off of that pile on your own and go from there then. So,
See him at
make
the
sure I
meeting.
got your information so I can get that over to you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
And then for the individuals, just to kind of jump right into the fishing report for the jackpot series, but the individuals that just joined, some of our boats are shorthanded on crews during our jackpot events. Once you're a member, you can jump in any boat that's looking for help. So if you're interested in coming out on the 2 August dates for jackpot series, reach out to Bradley, and if a boat's shorthanded, he'll get you connected with them to help fill out the boat. Jackpot series, obviously we just had the second event. I missed it. Lily and I went to Fishing Has No Boundaries, a different volunteer event that we hold close to us. All of our sponsors for this year's event, Bradley put together a nice presentation on that he's had, and the poster outside. Reminder on the payouts, it's a ton of different ways to pay out for each event. And then the season ending and the Master Angler, and this is what I love about it, even though I missed the second one, we're still going to be in contention for weekly events. So the second event results and series total results so far. 3 to win for the series have to be filled in, but good production so far on some of the boats. And then the Master Angler, just the same. We actually have 1 so far. I think Nick, you're the only one who's gotten all 5 species to date, so you're the first eligible. Over. Jim, Salmonorama side.
I can't believe it's to that point where this is the last meeting we'll have at this facility before the event. So our next meeting, general membership meeting, will be
On site.
July 9th, I believe.
Yeah, Wednesday, July 9th.
And that will be down at the festival hall for setup. So all this time that we keep thinking we have all this time, we at some point run out of time. With that being said, there's a few areas. One of the things Mike said, I understand a lot of people join Salmon Unlimited because of Salmonorama, and that's great. And I understand everybody wants to fish, especially with the price structure, but we do need some help. One of the things I can't stress enough is having the festival at the point where we are has been great for allowing us to do things in the community with the money that we give back, the sponsoring the veterans, the youth, the education, all of that is great. But that primary source of income comes from this event.
Yeah.
And as we grow this event to the point where we have, it allows us to do more in the community, but it makes it a lot tougher on the 3 or 4 of us that really work on this year round. And we are trying some different things this year. None of us really are expertise in any area. It would be great to have a grant writer, which we don't have, and so many other areas of need that we do our best, but again, we're fishermen as well. None of us are attorneys or doctors or lawyers by any means. So we put this together the best we can, but just by getting a few people to help out with one day, either bartending or running the raffles, that's where we generate a lot of our revenue. Fish weigh in. It's hard for me to get the community involvement when they want to support us because what we do, but they don't know the species of fish. And when you're talking the kind of money we're talking in this tournament, we need fish ID people that can easily recognize what the fish are that are being weighed in. So your coho, Chinook, rainbow, brown trout, we want those to not get confused with the money that's paid out. So that's where we really need our membership to step up and give one day. If everybody gave one day, we would fly through this with a breeze.
10 to 4, 4 to 10. One shift.
9 to 4.
Or sorry, 9 to 4. Yeah.
9 to 4, 4 to 10.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just give
So-
one, commit to one. You will make his life so much
By
easier.
Wednesday, Thursday, everybody wants a break from the boat. Come down. We got bands all 10 days. Come down, listen to the music. Take a night off from fishing, rest up, and give us a hand. And I think we'll be able to get through this pretty easily. But we do at this point, with a month to go, have way too many open spots. Another thing that we're doing this year is to help promote the size. The one thing we're getting some feedback on, the size of this event should be known across the entire country. And a lot of companies do know who we are. But one of the things we're looking at doing is bringing in a video production, and they're gonna do drone interviews and make a 3-minute advertising sort of, what would you call it, Josh? Not really a commercial, but,
Yeah, it's promotional.
it's
Just
a
the,
promotional video of the event, the people that are down there. You know, I think,
what it is, what we do.
so like, it's great to have Gamino here. What they do for the shore division probably goes unrecognized because not a lot of shore anglers are gonna run and thank them. But the impact it has on the shore division is astronomical for the shore anglers. So we want to be able to showcase how many people actually come to this event. So obviously somebody like Camino is being a sponsor, you have to have a return on your investment, right? You want to support the cause, but you also want a return on your investment. You want to know that people appreciate it, people are acknowledging your business and things of that nature. Well, one of the things we're hoping that this promo video will do is showcase how many people actually come to this event, how many people the banners are reaching, how many people that, at the award ceremony, when you thank these people, the sponsors. We really want to showcase the impact of it. So that's one of the new things that we're doing this year as well. Again, we have the kids fish pond. We're working with some different things with the kids to get some more involvement. You know, one of the things Mike was talking about is membership being at 145. You look around, there's nobody in here under probably 25 years old. We have to find a way to introduce these younger kids into the fishing and get some excitement, because kids overall just are not really very active in the outdoors at this point, and we have to bring an excitement to them. So the fish pond is a great way to do that. They get to catch fish and things of that nature. So other than that, again, the next meeting will be the setup. Please come down, please give us a hand. We'll have beverages down there and etc. If you can volunteer a shift, that would be fantastic, because we really, really need help. Particularly that 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. is one of the areas we're really struggling to get filled. So if you can give one day, it would help us out tremendously.
It's not really the super busy part of the day either, so it's
Yeah.
it's not real pressing with a lot of people.
Well, I think you run into two categories. You have those that like to come in the evening because there's music and entertainment and excitement. And you have those that come down that are more relaxed during the day, and they still can socialize, but there isn't a band blaring in the background.
We'll have
So-
Kenny G on for them.
So you definitely have, so whatever one works best for you, we'll get you signed up.
Yeah.
But other than that, 50,000 guaranteed grand prize again this year, and we are still working on some other things with the raffles. We again will have the table raffle, the kayak full of booze, the popcorn, the final day, all that stuff will be there again this year. So tell your family, tell your friends, come down, support us. We will be releasing a schedule of events coming up in the next week, we hope, but there's a lot of stuff going on this year, something for everybody.
Friday night fireworks is great.
Yeah, kickoff Friday.
Yeah.
Again, reach out to Jim, commit to one shift this week, and you'll make his life a lot easier. One shift, one day. If you want to do more, great, but give us one. Then, we have two guest speakers today because Ben and I and RJ were messaging back like a month and a half ago, and then I lost contact or track with it, and he messaged me today. He's like, "We're still on, right?" Yeah. Oh crap. So Ben had wanted to come out and talk to us, particularly about mercury cycling in the lake. Obviously, something very important to us. And I lost my laser pointer, so
I don't know, problem.
be gentle with the left button.
Yeah, no,
You know how they go straight, they don't circle.
Yeah. Oh, for the camera's sake, because we have a couple of viewers online.
All right. Well, thanks for inviting me down.
So,
Get
can you-
out of Milwaukee for a little while. So, my name is Ben Peterson. I'm a faculty member up at UW Milwaukee in the School of Freshwater Sciences. I just started there back in August. So, new to doing research in this area. I grew up in Wisconsin though, so familiar with that. But I don't want to talk about any specific projects, but just kind of want to talk generally kind of about mercury cycling and kind how the mercury is getting into the fish, and yeah, all that. So we'll get into it. And I know we're a little short on time, so I will be kind of skipping through some of these things. So normally when I'm talking about mercury, I kind of have to explain why it's important and why people care about it. I don't think this is the crowd, but I have to talk about that. Two, as you know, mercury is along with PCBs is kind of the primary reason that we have these fish consumption advisories kind of all across Wisconsin. I'm sure you've seen some of these charts. And so for me specifically, this is something I've been interested in for a long time because I grew up in Coosa, Wisconsin, which is in the center part of the state, right on the Wisconsin River, Lake Pequenwall area. I didn't get to do much salmon fishing growing up. This is like the one picture of me and my brothers when we got to go out on Lake Michigan, which was an awesome experience. But we spent most of our time chasing white bass and walleye and perch.
Good musky area.
Yeah, it was. We didn't do a lot of that. We were mostly interested in the walleye. But yeah, so it was always strange to me that there were certain fish that I couldn't eat or that I could kind of only eat so much of it. So that's kind of really stuck in my brain for a long time. And my interest in fishing is something I hope to pass on to my kid. You were just talking about getting interested in being outdoors and something that I think we can. All right, so we'll kind of zoom past for all that. So essentially what I want to talk about is just kind of the pathway that mercury goes from the point where it kind of initially gets into the environment to how it actually gets in the fish. So a lot of contaminants, you just kind of think about it getting into the environment, it interacts with the fish, and then it's a problem. It's something that can poison us. But mercury has kind of a more interesting path. It makes it interesting to study for me from a very nerdy perspective, but also kind of complicates the way that we think about mercury and kind of how we have to manage for it. And if I start running too long, just tell me if you want. So if we're thinking about mercury in the Great Lakes, so I want to talk about kind of specifically lake trout and salmon in Lake Michigan. And there's really two kind of key sources of mercury to the Great Lakes region. One of them is from atmospheric deposition, which I'll talk about first, and then the other is kind of what we hear about more often, just like legacy, like kind of polluted sites from kind of contaminated industrial areas. So first, the industrial or the atmospheric kind of component of it. Sorry, this kind of got shifted around a little bit. But essentially, this is just a kind of a timeline of kind of how much mercury we had in our atmosphere kind of over the last, what is this, about 300 years, a little over 300 years. So what you can see is that, so mercury is a naturally occurring element. It's present in the environment kind of everywhere, and it always has been there. And one of the major sources of that, which we can see kind of in this record where we get these spikes in mercury, is actually volcanic activity. So these massive volcano eruptions. So these spikes here are the Tambora volcano, which happened in the 1800s, Krakatoa, which people are more familiar with, and then Mount St. Helens up there. So when you get these massive volcanoes, we get all of this mercury that makes its way into the atmosphere. Kind of this second bulge right here is another kind of process that's associated with mercury. This is mercury from the gold rush, actually, from around 1850 to 1890 or so. So mercury was used in mining gold. If you go to a lot of places, I lived in California for a little while while I was doing my studies, and there were people there that had, like, in their cabins up in the mountains, they would have like mason jars like full of liquid mercury that was from the they'd always be like, do you want it? It's like, no. No one should have that. And then kind of more recently we see this kind of increase. So gold mining, we don't really use it kind of in the US anymore, but it's really still common in other parts of the world. And then this kind of more general increase that we've seen is just from more industrial sources. So coal-fired power plants are one of the big ones. Incineration of medical waste, which is both from batteries but also from fillings that get incinerated. But that's another kind of source of mercury. But the good news in terms of kind of mercury emissions is this kind of decrease that you're seeing up here at the top is significant. That's an actual kind of decrease that we're seeing. And especially here in the US, we've really decreased the amount of mercury that we've been emitting to the atmosphere. And it's actually kind of by accident. So a lot of the restrictions on like acid rain kind of emissions and the way that we've prevented acid rain also happens to just also eliminate mercury from a lot of these waste streams, which is really nice. And there's some other kind of specific things. But so generally kind of across the globe, but especially here in the US, we have we're putting out a lot less mercury into the environment.
I got a question on that.
Yeah, for
On
sure.
that last slide.
Oh boy.
Can I go
You
back?
know, it just, because I saw that was with the ice cores out of the Wyoming glacier.
Mm-hmm.
And you said Mount St. Helens blowing up.
There we go.
Yep.
And it's got a really big spike.
Yep.
And I know Krakatoa is on the other side of the world.
Mm-hmm.
The shock heard around the world.
Yep.
That. Is it because St. Helens was so close to Wyoming, is that why we see such a big spike?
Yeah, I would guess so. I think it's also partially so like the kind of the impact of Krakatoa was probably just as high because the rest of the mercury was lower like at that point in time. So you see we're starting down here at a lower point and then it kind of peaks up.
I'm just wondering if it's because it was closer,
I see what you're
that
saying.
the
Yeah.
deposit was heavier
Yeah.
into the ice.
Yeah, so that
Probably just stretch out a longer period
Where
of time.
Krakatoa has come, the trade winds have to carry it across the world.
exactly, yeah. So it does. So you have more impact from local sources, but with mercury, one of the things that makes it a problem is it really is kind of like a global issue because once it gets in the atmosphere, it'll stay there for a long time. So I was doing some work up in Alaska, and the kind of the major source of mercury that we were seeing from there was actually like China and Russia, and it was just power plants there.
I just wondered because of the spike is higher than what Krakatoa was.
When you say a long time, what is a long time in the atmosphere?
Usually a little over a year, so it can take up to a year, which is enough time for it to
Circles
to get
multiple
over there.
times around the yeah.
Mhm.
I was just curious if proximity to where the ice core was
Yeah.
had a relationship of how much they've actually found.
Yep. Yes, it does.
Because
Totally.
the mercury section is a lot wider up there.
Yeah, there's kind of a lot of it, and I mean Krakatoa is pretty massive. But yeah. Any other questions on this one?
Nope.
Okay.
Upward. It's three displays and stuff.
There we go. Yeah, that works. All right, so atmospheric mercury, it's up in the air. It does fall out eventually. So kind of in the Great Lakes, it just kind of evenly kind of distributed for the most part, with some exceptions because there's some changes locally. So for the legacy pollution sources, you've probably heard of a lot of these. So this isn't showing up terribly well, but this is just a map of the Great Lakes that has kind of the different kind of mercury kind of hot spots in there. We call them areas of concern. And so you hear a lot about these. They're often kind of from old chloralkali plants, which used to use mercury kind of directly in their process. Pulp mills for making paper. And while they're very visible, oftentimes the contamination it's like centered in the sediments, and it's kind of bound up deep down in the sediments. We can clean it up by dredging efforts, and it has these kind of important like local implications, but from like a kind of a broad ecosystem scale. It's not really the mercury that we're thinking about in like lake trout and salmon.
What happens to the dredged material?
It depends on where it's being dredged from. So
Typically.
yeah. So it oftentimes gets just shipped somewhere else. Hopefully where it's going to be well contained. Milwaukee has a dredging project that's planned for a couple of years from now, and right now they're building like a containment.
They did that in our small boat basement. They made a whole containment area before they tore
took it all away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, they have it. Yeah, it kind of depends on the system. I'm not too familiar with how they make those decisions, but yeah, it depends. All right. So industrial sources, often combined with sediments, kind of acute problems, but usually localized to specific areas. And this is also hard to read, but essentially what we can do is, so one of my colleagues did some work where he can use this kind of specialized method to tell where the mercury is coming from. So in here, I don't know how well you can see this, but the yellow kind of piece of the pie signifies how much of the mercury is coming from these kind of legacy polluted sites versus just the atmosphere, whereas the red and the blue are from the atmosphere. And you can see as you kind of look across the Great Lakes, Superior, not a lot of industrial influence, which you would expect. Down in Erie and Ontario, a lot of industrial influence, which you might also expect. And here, kind of on Lake Michigan, we kind of have a mix of both, depending on where you are. So if you're in Green Bay or kind of down by Chicago, you're going to have a lot of mercury coming from the sediments. But if you're up by Sleeping Bear Dunes, it's mostly coming from the atmosphere. And this really translates to what we see in the fish. So you can take this same method and apply it to the mercury that we find in the fish, and you can kind of try to tell where that mercury originated from. And so what we see is that most of the mercury in the lake trout and the salmon in Lake Michigan, specifically within Lake Michigan, is suspected that it comes from this atmospheric deposition. So it's relatively recent mercury that's being emitted. It's not, it's not these kind of really contaminated harbors and places like that. So when we're talking about kind of contaminated fish or contaminated waters or contaminated sites, the actual amounts that we're talking about is still like really, really low. So I was kind of doing a back of the envelope calculation, trying to figure out like how much mercury is in Lake Michigan. And if you just look at the surface water, not in the contaminated sediments, it's about 100 pounds of it across the entire, across the entire Lake Michigan, which, because it's so dense, it would fit like in a milk jug, like a gallon milk jug. So it's really not a lot. But the problem is it can get into the fish and it accumulates in the fish. And the two processes by which it accumulates in the fish are called bioaccumulation and biomagnification. So the bioaccumulation is just as the fish or whatever organisms, holds true for zooplankton, birds, any sort of animal that's being exposed, it increases in concentration as the organism gets older. And with biomagnification, as you move further up the food web, it also gets more and more concentrated as you move up the food web. So this is why you hear about mercury in like dolphins and sharks, tuna, things like that. These really kind of high on the food chain animals. And what makes this kind of interesting is that for mercury, this only happens when the mercury is in a specific form called methylmercury. So previously we were talking about just regular mercury. That's what's emitted from these different industrial sites. It's what's emitted from volcanoes. But it has to get converted into this methylmercury form before it can undergo these processes. And this is more what I am really focused on studying. The process by which it gets converted into this methylmercury, so this MEHG, is by these bacteria that live in the environment. And they occur naturally. They've been around for a long time. They're widespread throughout the environment. And they have this gene that we call HGCA, actually two genes, HGCA and HGCB. And this gene takes the mercury, converts it into methylmercury. We don't know why they do it. It doesn't seem to provide them any benefit. So that's kind of one of the things that we're really focused on. But essentially, we think of this process as kind of a gateway process for mercury because it's what allows the pollution to be converted into this contamination of the fish. So that you can really think of these microorganisms, these bacteria, kind of as the gatekeepers of this process. So just wanted to kind of wrap up here with kind of this proposed model that we're kind of working off of how mercury in these kind of pelagic feeding fish are making their way how the mercury is making its way into these fish. And essentially the idea is that the atmospheric mercury is deposited, it's transformed into methylmercury, and then this trout and the salmon can pick up the mercury based kind of on their feeding habits in the water column. And then just one quick point is we would think that because they're getting all their mercury from the atmosphere, that kind of this decline in atmospheric mercury would result in a decline.
Should trend downward.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what we would expect. And unfortunately, that is actually not necessarily the case. So this is an extremely busy slide, but all I want you to look at is this kind of green line here. So this is the mercury levels in lake trout in Lake Michigan. The green line is Michigan, the other ones are different. And you can see what happens is that essentially concentrations were declining until about 1990, and then they started to increase back up to kind of through 2000 and 2010, and now we've kind of started to see a decrease. And if you're familiar with kind of the history of Lake Michigan, this is right around the time that the zebra mussels and the quagga mussels really started coming in. And what we suspect is that not only in Lake Michigan, but kind of across these other systems, is that the way that the quagga mussels have changed the lake and the way that they've changed the food web has also changed the way that mercury is transferred through the food web and has kind of decoupled the mercury in the fish from what we're seeing in the atmosphere.
Now that we're kind of seeing some stabilization to those muscles, or because I see downward trend again, are we seem to be stabilizing again?
It seems so. I'll say that this is really preliminary. This study actually came out like this week.
Oh wow!
So not by me, but people have been kind of seeing this for a while. So this is kind of the most recent iteration of it. But we suspect that that's kind of what's happening, but it's a little early to tell. And some of like these large processes, it's like hard to kind of see what's happening in real time. It's like 5 years from now we'll have a really clear answer on that. But yeah, so this is kind of one of the areas that we're focusing on. And then the other thing I wanted to highlight is that, you know, a lot of this work has been done in lake trout, which do have kind of the way that they've adapted to the new food web in Lake Michigan is different. The lake trout and the salmon are kind of different.
Plus their lifespan is much longer.
Yeah.
As we'll hear about later.
And the growth rates are different. Yeah, there's a lot of things that kind of might be different about
Was Superior's line going down so steadily? Is that because they don't have super muscle?
Yeah, we suspect so. It's interesting though. You'll notice that these are the concentrations. So the superior line is high, and that's something that has been noted for quite a while. That kind of strangely the mercury concentrations in superior fish are higher than in any of the other grades.
That's depth of water. Maybe.
Yeah, I'd be happy to a long time about that. Yeah.
So a few years back, they were talking that for consumption, they were recommending that you not eat lake trout over 26 inches. Then they come out and it was thought that they were testing them wrong and testing the stomach content versus the actual meat. Have you changed that way of checking these fish? Is the mercury in the meat or just the stomach?
Yeah, so these measurements are in the meat. I'll say
Question to that: do you grind the whole fish up, or do you take specific areas?
usually for fish of a certain size, so like at the really small like minnows and stuff, you just kind of homogenize everything. But for fish of this size, you fillet it and you take a cut of the fillet.
So you're taking the prime meat.
I was going to ask if the lower fatty section
That's what
versus the meat section, if you guys had like tested the, if we filleted off the bottom half of the fish, are we, seeing a substantial reduction?
A lot of us actually, I fillet my lake trout with a lot of meat left on the skin, and then I'll trim all the belly fat completely off.
Right.
When I heard that this could be dangerous, I've been giving it to my neighbors. Still nothing, so I don't.
Yeah, you're worried about declining membership, maybe.
Yeah, I can't understand why.
I was just curious because we generally take more of the prime of the fish.
Yeah, that was the same question I was alluding to.
Yeah.
Is if you guys have tested sectionally body fat versus.
I was told you just grind them all up. That's what I heard.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people do that. I will admit I don't actually know how these ones were
So there is no
processed.
standardized
There may be, he just
Yeah.
doesn't know.
testing process then.
Yeah, they have for different like for regulatory versus like research purposes, they'll have it different. So like for the regulatory, I'm not sure how they-
What does that mean?
Who does
So-
that do that?
So
Yeah.
theoretically, if our club was curious about that, how we need to see how much that would cost to fund for you guys to sample, the meat versus.
Well, the second part of this question is gonna be, have you tested the lake trout that primarily are along the shore versus the lake trout which are in deeper water?
It's been mostly deeper water, and part of that is just access to the lake and kind of the research vessels that we have access to, and
what your
how we
study
use
is.
this.
Yeah.
So like these long-term data sets. So like this one especially, like this is over 40 years. So these types of studies are often run off of the Lake Guardian, the large EPA vessel that operates out of Milwaukee, and they can't go that shallow. So that's kind of one of the gaps that they've noted in their data sets. It is primarily kind of pelagic.
Because I catch a lot of fall, and spring lake trout, and that's not too, from 50 feet and under.
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
where we're fishing them.
Yeah, so those ones, yeah, so those ones are probably missed by this sampling, and so I'll kind of, I think it's on the next. Well, we've kind of hashed through all of those. So, like I was saying, a lot of the data and things that I was talking about is not studies that I've been working on. They're work that the EPA and the USGS has been doing, but while I just started at Milwaukee, and there's another faculty member that just started there at the same time that I do, and he does a lot of contaminant in kind of fish work as well, and has been interested in how fish are actually moving contaminants kind of around the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
Which is something I hadn't really considered until I talked to him. So him and I are kind of hoping to, dive into some of these other questions, but it sounds like we should come and talk to you guys. Because some of these things are, things
We
that we
could
don't
supply
necessarily-
you with nearshore samples.
Yeah, well, and these are things that we don't, that don't always make it into a sampling.
Sure.
But that's good too.
If I understand you correctly, the methodology has probably changed over the years as well. So
Yeah.
the data that you're comparing from 30 years ago was processed differently than the data that you're processing now.
Yes, oftentimes, in some cases, but like with this was data was from museum specimens, I think, so preserved kind of over time. So the guy who wrote the paper was able to kind of go in and sample in the same way, kind of. And I think for this one, like I said, I think he used just like dorsal, like just the flesh.
Whatever made you go into this field out of curiosity?
Like mercury.
Yeah.
Well, I'll first say that I'm a science-y kind of nerd, and I am interested in a lot of. I mean, if you set me down in front of some unusual phenomena, I will get lost in it and find it interesting. But this one in particular, mercury, is a really complicated problem because it's not as simple as just kind of getting rid of, it's like with dredging the harbor. It's like, we try to just dredge harbors, and it'll kind of go away. But that's not necessarily how it works. And the kind of levers in the environment that control it are just a lot more complicated than that. So I think, whether it's the Great Lakes or inland lakes or wetlands or streams or rivers, there's a lot of ways that we can kind of think about minimizing the impact of mercury on the fish that people are eating.
Mercury is not a problem isolated to freshwater fish either.
No.
Saltwater fish have the same problems.
Yeah. yeah, it's a huge issue globally. And yeah, I mean, it's a problem here, but like the kind of the amounts of mercury that we're seeing, like I said, here are decreasing, while in other places it's kind of still going up and up and up. So
And again, you said it was about 100 pounds in Lake Michigan?
100 pounds, yeah.
Yeah,
In the-
and he said it was like less than a gallon to do that.
Holy
Yeah.
cows.
That for the whole lake.
Just the
Yeah.
particles of that.
Yeah,
Wow.
So yeah, doesn't take much.
yeah.
What happens to the rivers? Like the salmon go up there and die over decades. Does that accumulate the mercury more heavily in the rivers then?
Yeah, so that's actually, so my colleague who started at the same time I did, Brandon, he has a paper looking at that actually, where you can measure. I think he was looking at the mercury in kind of the invertebrates that are living in the sediments upstream in these rivers, and then also in like the smaller fish. I can't remember what he's looking at, perch maybe. But if those like streams are directly connected to the Great Lakes and they're getting salmon upstream and the salmon are spawning, putting their eggs out there, then there's a ton of mercury in those like invertebrates and in those fish. Yeah, between the carcasses and the eggs. He was saying that the eggs, there's a big kind of transfer that mercury gets just kind of chemically the way it works. It gets really enriched in the eggs. It's not just with fish, that's just kind of where it partitions to, but so when fish lay their eggs, when female fish lay their eggs, they actually lose a substantial portion of the mercury that's in their body.
Yeah.
But then it's in the eggs, and if other fish are eating those eggs, then that's a problem.
Other fish, other wildlife. Actually, some of it could get transferred out of the river with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a dragonfly mercury project.
Right.
It's like a large scale. I don't know if you've seen that before, but looking at kind of how I think it's in all the national parks, or a lot of the national parks, that citizen scientists can collect dragonfly larvae. And it's essentially looking at how much mercury is being transferred out of the streams by these insects. Just kind of crazy.
The government funding cuts and stuff like this, studies.
Yeah, it's limited a lot of the work that's been going on. It's hard to say just because things are so uncertain. But there have been like the lake guardians like out right now collecting samples. So some of those things are ongoing. But there have been like a few colleagues that I know have had funding that was cut or lost for things like this.
Have you heard about the new way that we're going to try and get rid of the mussels? That they can't get rid of them? Then will that affect the filtering and?
Yeah, the kind of the muscle masher, maybe. Yeah. So the guy who does a lot of work on that is also in our department. And him and I, we have a proposal in right now, the Wisconsin Sea Grant, to ask that exact question. Actually, he is kind of ongoing. He has some work ongoing both near Milwaukee and out at Sleeping Bear, and kind of trying to kind of optimize the removal methods. So we're hoping to get some funding to kind of follow up on the mercury question with that. But that's exactly what we think, that if we start to kind of shift the food web back in the other direction, we'll see some of these things change. But the scale on which you'd have to take mussels out of the lake would be pretty huge. Yeah, pretty huge. So that's not immediately forthcoming.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
You mentioned eggs.
Mm-hmm.
At the hatchery, have you taken any of the smolts and checked them for mercury? You see it's transferred in the reproduction process. Are these smolts coming out with mercury in them already?
That's a really good question.
We're giving you a lot of
To
work
my
tonight.
knowledge. I know.
You'll be sending
Have to-
40
have to
mercury
go.
batches.
Tackle it. Reach out to the DNR and maybe get a sampling of one of their
Yeah.
classes.
More
Well,
grant submissions.
Yeah, well, I teach a class in the fall that one of the kind of units that we do is we go down to the steelhead facility right here. So we were down here last fall. That's a great idea.
Just
We're gonna,
wondering if it's carrying
It would make sense if the eggs are showing them.
parent to the egg to the
Yeah.
smolt.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how much of it. Yeah, that's a good question. Of like how much of it kind of in the egg and the yolk would actually make it into the young. Probably a lot.
Yeah,
I would
well,
guess. But
if it's still showing up in the young, they're starting it from the first day.
If you happen to do it, can you send us a report back?
yeah, for sure.
Or you can
Yeah,
always
I
come
mean,
back
we-
and tell us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know where to find you guys.
We'd welcome you back.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, I mean, we were talking about kind of with the Sea Grant proposal, but yeah, I would love to come back.
As I understand it, they're out there and they're foraging and eating, they're taking in
Yeah.
minute bullets that accumulate. But are they starting out with some in there in the process already?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have a good answer for that.
Well, I was just curious. If anybody has ever,
Yeah, there's probably someone's probably looked at it somewhere. But yeah, but it would be interesting to see here specifically. I'll just ask Ryan about that.
I have a bunch of
Thank you.
fish.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Stick around if you want. They'll probably
Yeah,
peg you or
yeah.
more. And then with that, transferring over, we were just talking about aging of lake trout, and we saw a great. How old was that tag fish?
39 years old. And
39
boy, did it
years
go
old.
viral. I had no anticipation of that.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
So, to the same effect, Matt was looking to talk to us about the tagging program, and then that article came out right as we had him booked. So, like you said, it was great timing. But this transitions well from the topics we were just bringing up.
Yeah, so the genesis for that article, our office has a social media Facebook page. We got to put out a couple posts a week. So I just thought it'd be fun to tell the story of the oldest fish we've observed. And I guess you guys picked it up. So that was a lot of fun. And Ben, you're going to have to say hi to Brandon for me. We should chat. Yeah. So my name's Matt. I am the acting director of the Great Lakes Mass Marketing Program. And I'm here to share with you some of our study results. Now, I did send in my long version of the presentation, so I'm going to try to skim over a few things. But basically, I'm going to go over an overview of what we do with Fish and Wildlife Service, and then specifically within mass marking. And then talk about the study results from Chinook salmon, lake trout, and steelhead tag. So I'm just going to kind of gloss over this. It's a quick question we always get is what's the difference between Fish and Wildlife and DNR? The easiest way I can put it is DNR has the management levers. They set harvest limits, they set regulations, but they also work within the jurisdiction of their particular states. Fish and Wildlife, our role is to assist these partners with management of aquatic resources. The way we do that is with mass marking is coordinate across all the states on Lake Michigan, so Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Illinois, and provide data to all those states to help inform them with management of the fishery. So within our office, obviously I'm spending most of the time talking about mass marking, but we're up in Green Bay. It's about 2.5 hours north of here. And we do have several other programs that might be worth having out at some point. So we have an aquatic invasive species monitoring branch. There's one of these in all the lakes, basically out there to detect new presence of Asian carps and other invasive species.
Anything new or still
No.
from Lake Michigan?
Yeah, so there's over the past decade, there's been a handful of positive DNA detections. So one of the things they do is they sample water for environmental DNA that can come from bird.
Yeah.
So that when we get a positive carp sample, we send everybody out with a whole bunch of nets, and we have yet to catch an actual living carp upstream of the Chicago. That doesn't mean they're not there, but we have not detected them.
Okay.
Grass carp is a different story. Those have been around for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I should say to anybody, feel free to pop in with questions throughout if you have them. I'll say, so moving on, we have a native species branch, invasive native. They focus on baseline population surveys for lake trout, burbot, whitefish. They also do a fair bit of habitat mapping, looking at the bathymetry of the lake, and that sort of thing. We have a partnerships and habitat branch. They're mostly in tributaries, doing work on connectivity, kind of improving culvert connections, and doing some brook trout restoration and mussel research. And then we have a program that's assisting with lake sturgeon restoration, both with streamside rearing of juveniles and then research on adults. And this picture actually was about 5 minutes from my house, so that's pretty cool. That's up there in De Pere at the dam where they come up every spring. So that's a nutshell of what we do at our office in Green Bay, outside of Great Lakes Fish Tagging and Recovery, which is more commonly known as mass marketing. So our branch has 4 major components that I'll get to, but they're represented here in the picture. We've got tagging, recovery, the extraction of the tags, and then data analysis and outreach events like this. So our program is a collaboration of federal, state, and tribal agencies. We have been around since 2010, coordinated by the Fish and Wildlife Service, and it was started at the request of the states via the Great Lakes Fishery Commission to address questions on the survival, contribution, and wild production of salmon and trout. Yes, sir.
You keep talking about fish tagging. Does that include the implants and so forth that, they're, when we bring our fish in, oftentimes just scanning for implants? Is that part
Yes.
of the tagging program?
That
or
is-
the tag strictly a tag stuck in the fish?
That's all part of the tagging program.
Same
Yes.
program.
In fact, we have a team scheduled to be here for Salmonorama in late July. You'll see Grace, and this year we're a little short-staffed, which I'll get to, but Tim Urbiak from DNR will be helping her.
Second question that usually when we have our tournament, like we did this past Saturday, we were always taking samples. I was curious why they weren't there.
Yeah, and I'll get to that, but the main reason they're not there is because of basically because we weren't allowed to hire a ton of seasonals. Last year we had 13 seasonal staff. This year we have 5.
Okay,
So
that explains it.
Yep.
I was curious.
So we're doing the best we can with what we've got, and we're going to continue to do that. But that's the reason. Yep. All right. So yeah, started in 2010 to address these various measures. As I said, states have management authority. We coordinate across jurisdictions with this research. We have been funded by the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which has always had strong bipartisan support, but it is not permanent or base funding. If we were to go away, we would have to find a new source of funding. And then thanks to support from you and from other anglers, I mean, really the study couldn't happen without folks letting our techs sample and collect all the data. We have 12 years of data, over 172,000 fish from open water anglers. It really gives us a powerful data set to get at a lot of these management questions. So as I mentioned, we have tagging and marking of hatchery fish. We just had a whole bunch of folks come home from Platte River in Michigan today, wrapping up coho tagging. Data collection and tag recovery from the sport fishery. So this is where you're most likely to see us at Salmonorama or other cleaning stations. Wanding your fish, looking for a tag, collecting all sorts of specimens. It's been a while, but back in 2015, we actually partnered with his colleague Brandon in collecting mussels for a mercury study. So, we've dabbled in all sorts of things because we put our hands on so many fish. Then in the fall and winter, we focus on getting those tags out of each of the heads. That's not an automated process the way the tagging is, so that takes much longer. We also age wild fish. And then we do things like data analysis and support for fisheries managers. And I know that picture is small, but I like to joke about how poorly I've aged. It's from my first day there. So what you're looking at this figure, this is summarizing our marking and tagging. You got a number of marked fish in millions by year. And you can see for most of this, 2020, that's kind of an exception. We all know what happened there. But for most of this, we're marking between 9 and 10 million fish every year in using these autofish marking trailers. And that's primarily been lake trout in green, Chinook salmon in blue, and then steelhead here in purple. Now, in coordination with the 4 states on Lake Michigan and at their request, we've diverted the funding that had been used for steelhead to coho salmon. So starting this year, when we see the 2025 graph, there'll be a big yellow bar for coho and no more steelhead for tagging at present. But we'll still be recovering those fish, those steelhead, for several years and getting data on. So to actually kind of bring you into the tagging trailer, I can show you how we tag some fish. If I can just click on this video somehow. Wonder
Yep.
it.
I think you're on the
Just looking for the
screen.
marker.
Oh,
Oh, there it is. There it is. All right. All right. So, hopefully the button's not too loud. Oh, it's not volume off. All right. So these fish are in the trailer in the. Oh wow! What is? Cool. That's totally on its side. I'm not really sure why it's doing that, but they're up in this big holding pen. This is our sorter. This red device is using optics to very rapidly measure these fish. Because each of the tagging lines is calibrated. You see there's these 6 lines here. You're going to have to kind of stand on the side. They're each calibrated to a specific size range of fish because you need to have the fin fit in a certain clipping window. And that shouldn't have stopped there.
no, I
Oh, you
sorry.
stopped it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and so then in each of these tagging lines, they actually they swim up. There's current going this way, so we will focus on how the fish swim upstream. They actually swim in here on their own. This brown device is the clipper. It's going to come down. You can actually see a fish like right there if you have really good eyes. It's going to come down and clip that fin, and at the same time, this is what you see on the outside. These blue devices have a head bulb. The snout of the fish goes right in there, and it gets that little tag inserted in its snout. So keeping these things going, as we learned this last trip, we had some major troubleshooting issues. It's can be a lot of monkeying around, but when they're going good, about 8,000-9,000 fish an hour come out of these things.
And how many you do?
9 to 10 million a year. So, and that's with doing 3 species. We do lake trout at the federal hatcheries, and then this year Chinook salmon and coho salmon at the state hatcheries. So
That's not all just Wisconsin, that's all the Great
Across the
Lakes.
Great Lakes?
that's across. So we have talked with some of the other Great Lakes, but it is Lake Michigan and the U.S. waters of Lake Huron, with present funding levels and interest. I know when we spoke with managers in Lake Erie,
Because you're the Green Bay office.
we're the Green Bay office, yeah, and they were more interested in kind of river collections. We did do a lot of tagging for Lake Ontario for back in the day, Lake Trout and Chinook, coordinating with New York DEC, but they did a 5-year study on Chinook and then they mothballed their trail. But we are continuing to work here in Michigan and Huron, and we keep cycling through the species. Coho, we've never done before, but we'll get some really cool information on that. This other video kind of just shows you. Let's see if this one turns on. Yeah, that turned on its side too. Well, basically the main thing to see in this video, if I just kind of skip ahead here, is coming out of the back of the trailer. We have this hatch. We go in here every hour and we sample the fish to make sure we're getting successful clipping and tagging. So you can kind of see them coming out here. And so over the course of like 12 years, we have data on probably 100,000 fish in the hatcheries. That's why we're pretty confident when we say 99.5% of them are coming out with a clip, 96% are coming out with a tag. So that gives us, kind of quality control on what we're putting out in the lake. Or I should say what the states are putting out in the lake, we're in their hatcheries tagging these fish. So, then the other major part of our program is, again, where you guys are going to interact with our folks, the recovery of these data. Now, in a typical year, which this is turning out not to be, we have crews stationed in New Franken, Milwaukee, Illinois, Michigan City, Charlevoix, and Alpena. What we have right now is one team in New Franken, one in Milwaukee, and one in Michigan City. And so we are prioritizing where we're sampling this year based on prior year's recoveries, trying to go where we typically see the most fish on any given weekend. Salmonorama is like one of our top 5 producers, so we'll definitely be down here for that. But again, and then these red circles are all the ports that we sample in a typical year. So part of what allows us to kind of coordinate and collaborate with a lot of other groups is we're putting our hands on 10 to 20,000 fish every year. Last year it was a little over 13,000. The bottom set gill nets that are run by all the agencies, those are primarily catching lake trout. We also get a lot of lake trout, but if folks are interested in research on Chinook salmon, coho salmon, brown trout, pink salmon, Atlantic salmon, our survey is one of the most abundant sources for those samples in Lake Michigan. So that's put us involved in a lot of kind of bonus work in addition to what we're learning from these tags. So the third major component is pulling these tags out. We've recovered a little over 157,000 tags so far. Those tags are etched with a 6-digit number, corresponds to a group of fish. I should say each of these tags is like a metal filing. I think it comes out to like 1/25 of an inch or something like that. They're a millimeter long. And so that code is a batch code. It'll correspond to a group of fish with the same characteristics, from the same hatchery, same year, same stocking location, same genetics. So when we get that return information, we can use all of that to look at things like the movement rates, growth, because we know how old the fish is, relative survival from stocking locations. That's always a big interest with the states. You know, where are we going to get the best bang for our buck in terms of putting these fish? So that's some of the information we get from this. And then, as I said, we also age wild fish. I have a admittedly cherry-picked photo of an excellent otolith. This is an ear bone from a fish where you can kind of count rings on a tree. You can kind of see your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 at the edge there. They tend to be a little messier than that, but nonetheless, you get the gist of how that process works. And then in the interest of time, I'm just really going to gloss over this, but basically the two main things to know is that every year these data feed into models that the states are using to make management decisions. One of the big ones is predator-prey ratio. That's what informs the states the states use that information to inform their stocking policies. So, about, I think, 2013 and 2016, there were Chinook salmon stocking reductions because they're in the period we have prey in the lake. More recently, there were stocking increases because we saw an increase in prey relative to the amount of predators. And our data in estimating Chinook salmon population size feeds is one of the things that feeds directly. There's a bunch of other models that this stuff gets used on. And then because we put our hands on so many fish, without getting into any detail whatsoever, we've been able to look at things like sea lamprey wounding, diet. We've been doing diet work with a lot of partners for pretty much the last decade. There's a really cool set of studies where they're using those ear bones I mentioned. They shoot them with lasers. I'm not kidding on that. And what that does is it allows them to peel off the chemical signature that's at the core of that otolith, and then that's going to correspond with the environmental signature of various rivers. That core is what it had when it hatched. Basically, by doing that, they can estimate, hey, this wild fish came likely from this watershed. So we're doing that for all of the 3 Pacific salmon. That's the steelhead, Chinook salmon, and coho salmon. Those are all led. Well, Central Michigan University and Michigan State University are the main colleagues there. We looked at genetic composition of lake trout. As I mentioned, we did some mercury biocontamination, and then more recently PFAS biocontamination. Basically just helping out by collecting samples across this massive lake because we have crews out there doing it anyway. So we already touched this on a little bit, but our program status, we are working to officially address our key priorities with the resources that were provided, but we do have this period of staff turnover and transition going on right now. Our program director, Chuck Bronte, he's retired. If you've been around here for a while, I know he's given talks in the past, so you may have met Chuck. We had our head tagger, Jim Webster, he also retired. We had our Lake Huron biotech and database specialist. She took another job in the private sector. And then, as I mentioned, we have this reduced seasonal workforce for 2025. So that's been some of the change we've been dealing with. And nonetheless, so far, we've probably collected maybe 500 fish so far on the season. And I'm anticipating by the end of the season, we're hopefully going to be about 5,000-6,000. So we're trying to get about half of our normal sample size with slightly less than half the staff. So we'll see how that works out. But we did make, our whole region is on board with this. Marking and tagging of the fish is a priority. So all of the planned tagging has been going forward as planned. We've actually been pulling in staff from some of the other programs in our office to help train them up on tagging fish, help clip these fish. Some of the folks who would usually be out at like last week's tournament, they were clipping fish for coho salmon in Platte River. So that's been part of how we've devoted the resources there. And with the tag and recovery, this year we're not really sampling on Lake Huron. We're focusing on Lake Michigan tournaments that are known to produce high numbers of fish. So that's what we're looking at this year. And I still think we're going to have useful data set from this summer when all is set. So with that, I will move on to some of the key things we've learned about Chinook salmon. One of the things we learned first is that they move all over the lake for most of the year. And this isn't a terrible shock because in the Pacific Ocean, they're moving a lot more distance than they are here in the Great Lakes. But some examples of this, we look at these maps. You're looking here at Chinook salmon that were landed at the port of Manitowoc. So every fish in this map was caught by an angler who landed their boat here in Manitowoc, and we sampled them at the cleaning station there. These circles are proportional in size to where those fish were stocked. So you're seeing Chinook salmon in Manitowoc being caught from Huron, from the whole Michigan shore, from same deal. And if you move across the pond, Frankfurt, the map looks almost the same. In fact, for virtually every port in Lake Michigan, the map looks very similar. You see slightly larger circles on Wisconsin, even here in Michigan, in part because we see higher survival of those fish, which I'll get to. The only thing that looks different is in Traverse City, we only really see fish that are stocked there, and that's because it's this bay with limited access. At least we think that's why there's less of this movement. But in the open waters, we're seeing it all over the place. One kind of fun thing I put in here that I'm not going to skip over just because it's locally relevant. So to kind of bring this home, I took a figure here for Chinook salmon landed in this area. So these are Chinook salmon landed in Racine, Kenosha, North Point, and Waukegan. So all within, I don't know, maybe 50 miles of where we're standing today. These are Chinook salmon, tagged Chinook salmon that were landed here. Here are their stocking locations. So from April through July, fish that were kind of stocked in this area, WM6 in Illinois is this area. That's the area of the lake. That's that green part of the pie. So less than a quarter of the fish you're catching here, if they're stocked, less than a quarter were stocked here. This far is the rest of Wisconsin. This is Indiana. This is actually fish from Lake Huron. We do see almost 95% of the fish stocked in Lake Huron. When we see them, they're recovered in Lake Michigan. They're moving over here to feed, in part because alewife have collapsed in Lake Huron. And then these are fish stocked in Michigan. If we move into August, you are going to see the stocking location does matter in the fall. So these fish are only in the rivers maybe 2 to 4 weeks after they're stocked, but it's during the critical smolt stage when they imprint on those streams. So in August, we start to see that green bar get bigger. Again, those are those local fish. And by the time we get to September and October, you're pretty much catching locally stocked fish for Chinook salmon here in this area.
Can I ask a question related to that? Because that ties into
ahead.
our club. We have a net pen program. Have you seen any variance between ports that use net pens versus ones that are directly dumped into the river?
Yes, so that is a good question. So we have not, but others have. So let me expand on that. So within Lake Michigan, the way that the tag lots were set up, there isn't really a paired design between the net pens and the truck stocked fish for particular rivers. Mm-hmm. And so when we look at return rates, we don't really have a good controlled experiment. So it's not the best way to look at that. But in Lake Ontario, they did a very controlled experiment where they had separate tag lots for those net pens and fish stocked outside of the net pens in the same set of streams,
mm-hmm.
and it was about a 2-to-1 survival benefit for net pens. So
they actually did appear to work to drive them back.
It did appear, the net pens did appear to work in terms of elevating survival of the fish in the net pens.
Okay.
And the way that study was designed and the results, I think it was pretty convincing.
Okay, thank you.
Could you tell our DNR that?
I asked that for you.
I was waiting for him to say it.
They felt that the net pen program, they're gonna go along with it, but they felt that it didn't make a difference. So they need to hear this.
So they have heard it, but they can hear it again.
Louder into the microphone, please.
Yeah.
Why he brought it up, he's running that show for a long time, and someone else has taken over, so it's always been his concern.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I'll say I don't know all the factors that go into those decisions within DNR.
Well, I have done the study and learned about Ontario and how well that worked over there, and that was supported it, but Wisconsin, not so much.
Yeah, and I guess that's somewhat surprising to me, because when I've talked with them, at least in the past, there has been some support for that program.
It ain't a
certainly.
surprise.
I was surprised when you said something.
When you look at their budget, it ain't a surprise.
Well, so, and I am not familiar with their budget, and that might be your
Well,
answer.
they're not
here.
familiar with it either.
Well, like I said, there's a lot of factors that go into this aside from the biology, of which I'm unaware. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's good to hear that, though.
Anyway, yeah. So am I being broadcast live to DNR right now?
We didn't care about the DNR. It was for our own
Say hi to
sake
Cheryl.
of knowing how to represent our club and our interests.
Well, actually, our club is told one thing, and
Yes.
you're saying something else.
Yeah. So
It's by another study.
Well, I mean, I will say the results from Lake Michigan, they have been, I mean, inconclusive is the best way to say it.
That's what we were
There has not been
told.
an obvious benefit for fish stocked in these neck dens relative to others.
Yes.
We're not here to beat anyone down, but we're always looking for information.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. So,
How
yeah.
how hard would it be to, let's say, Racine's gonna get, just throwing a number out there, 100,000 smolt of Chinook. How
Okay.
hard would it be for you to take two separate groups
Yes, so
with
it's,
different numbers?
that's part of why the design was the way it was. So, is it hard for us to tag two separate lots of 50,000? No. But is it hard to find separate raceways to hold all those fish? Yes.
Yeah.
Typically, our biggest constraint on the number of head tag lots is, like, I can't think of a particular number, but like, there's one hatchery, it's got 8 raceways, so we can do 8 tag lots, right? So, you know, we're limited by those hatchery constraints, because the fish do have to stay in the hatchery for a little bit before they get.
Plus, the more hatcheries you put them in, the more risk of infection or anything else, correct?
There is part of that, but I will say with, these tagging trailers, they use them in the Pacific Northwest as well. The Great Lakes program has the most rigorous disinfection procedures. We disinfect that trailer when we're done with a project at one hatchery and before we start the next project at the next hatchery. So it's double disinfected between every hatchery. But, and with good reason, because you don't want to spread infection if some were to occur.
Okay, Mike. Would it skew your data? Let's say you got 8 raceways. That to take, like from raceway 1, 50,000 in stock member seed. Even though that the smolts in raceway 8 are scheduled for a different stocking place, to take 50,000 of them to put them in receipt. So when you see them come back to receipt, I know it's going to skew your data a little bit.
Yeah.
But they did print it on that river to come back
So,
here.
and that is an idea. The challenge there, so a lot, when we're looking at things like survival rates, one of the important assumptions we're making is that we're sampling from a mixed population, which happens for Chinook salmon in the open water season. But when they're coming back to the rivers, comparing returns to one river versus another river, especially with like an angler-based catch, that could be largely skewed based on, what particular day you're out at there, how many anglers are there, that sort of thing.
So you're not sampling when they're coming back in the river when the DNR is there. They're not even checking for CWT.
Well, they are, yes, they are. So at the weir, they are. And so if we were to have paired lots, we would be able to do that for those river returns at the weir. Our program has never had the resources to do river collections, so we've done all this work open water.
Right.
It's up to the states to do collections in the
Oh, I
streams at the weirs.
understand it. It'll skew your data for the open water fish.
Well, we would analyze it separately, so that wouldn't be a concern. But in terms of what you're suggesting, it would work contingent upon a dedicated stream sampling program at particular rivers for the return rates. Because otherwise, in our data, if you have those fish from 2 different raceways, and say that one tag lot you siphoned off 50,000, put in Racine, and the other half went to Kiwani. Well, then when we're seeing the data in open lake, we don't know if it's a Kiwani signal or a Racine.
I know it would skew your data.
Yeah.
Drastic.
Well, right.
I know that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that for purposes of finding out a definitive plan, whether the net pens in Wisconsin work, for returns, what, how much of the difference in the return would be, like they did in Lake Ontario, to do it here.
Currently, you don't have the funding to be able to do it, right?
Right. Certainly not right now, but it would be interesting to do. And, you know, I gave this presentation to Salmon Unlimited in Illinois a month ago. I gave it to a club up in Algoma 3 months ago. Every club is asking about napkins. So, I mean, the one thing I can commit to is, you know, all of us are getting together, all the states and the feds. We have 2 annual meetings for Lake Michigan at the technical committee. One's coming up in July. I can mention it to my colleagues at this, hey, this is coming up at Angler Club meetings. You know, is there continued interest in working on this? And see what they say.
We just like to get a better, more controlled experiment for the net bends like they did in Ontario.
Yeah. No, I get that. I would like to have that too. 'Cause it would provide some good answers.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Where were we? All right. So Chinook. Yeah. In the interest of, well, this is important. It's all cool. But I'm going to try to be quick. I was saying how the Huron fish are all here in the speeding season. That's what we're looking at in these figures. So every fish you see here was stocked in northern Lake Huron. Right here, the dot sizes are proportional to where they are recovered.
Wow.
April through July, you're seeing most of those fish in Lake Michigan, particularly northern Lake Michigan. We do see that signal of them returning, natal homing to spawn when we come to the spawn season. So that's an interesting trend. I mentioned we estimate wild recruitment. This is based on the fin clips. Basically, we observe the percentage of wild fish. We know how many fish were stocked, so we can use a ratio and figure out how many wild fish must have been there.
What were the exact years we missed our clipping because of COVID?
Yes.
2020 for sure.
2020 was it.
That was it.
That was it. So there was one tag lot of Chinook salmon that was tagged. Actually, it might have been steelhead down at Jake Wolf in Illinois. Because we were down there in March. So it, like, literally, we left the hatchery and came back to the news that COVID had broken out. We weren't allowed back in the state hatcheries that year, which is why steelhead and Chinook didn't get tagged. By the time we reached fall, we were comfortable tagging the lake trout if we had certain rules in place where it was select staff and no interaction and masking and all that jazz. So it was really just the 1 year class that we got that missed.
So those are almost gone now.
They are pretty much gone now because we see most of our fish most Chinook salmon are done by age 3. So by now, if it doesn't have a fin clip, it is most likely a wild fish. So that's the percent wild. We convert that into the smolt estimate. So what you're going to see here right away, this is the estimate of millions of smolts. Stocked is orange, wild is blue. I'm going to point out 2020 right now. Every data point on this map, on this figure, is a direct measurement from real data, except for 2020. 2020 is an average of 2018, 2019, and 2021, because we don't know which fish were wild and which fish were not from the 2020 year class. For every other year class, so like in 2021, because we age these fish, we can say, okay, that fish doesn't have a fin clip. Well, if it turns out that it is aged out to the 2021 year class, then we know it's wild. If it's a 2020 year class, we don't know if it's wild or not. So that's why it's only affecting this 1 year class estimate. And rather than leaving that blank, we put in an average value.
Are we seeing any success in Wisconsin, or is it still primarily Michigan waterways?
Fortunate.
Yeah, for wild.
For wild, it is primarily Michigan waterways. Yeah. And that is based on kind of research I've done with literature. It's environmental.
Yeah, of
right?
Course.
Yeah. They have the cold water streams, less agriculture, more forest in the watershed.
Yes. Yeah.
It creates conditions that are more favorable for not only spawning but survival of the eggs and the juveniles.
Yeah.
You have different coloring now. 2023, is that an estimate too?
I do, and that is an estimate from data. So the reason that's there, we do a formal estimate at age 2, and the reason for that is when the fish come back at age 1, we've noted that the wild fish are always smaller than the hatchery fish. They grow at the same rate once they're in the lake, but for like age 1 fish, your average size for an age 1 wild, it might be 18 inches, and for a stock it's 20. At that range, it's kind of close enough it might bias our results. So we do age 2 fish, but we want to get the information as soon as possible. So we still do it for age 1, And we have a conversion relationship for H2. So you'll notice this year class is 2023. That's based on last year's 2024 data. So this was estimated using H1 fish. That's why it's a different color, because we know for a fact that that is going to change at some point. Now, we've done that for the past, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years, and it usually doesn't change all that much, plus or minus 10%. So this does give us and the managers in DNR a fairly rough idea of what that year class size is going to be. But it's not a final number. That's very, very astute to pick up on the different colors. So you kind of can see the kind of the time series trend here. I mentioned we had these stocking cuts in 2013 and 2016. You can see that the orange bar is going back higher because of stocking increases. The most recent 2-year classes, we're looking at a total of about 10 to 13 million smolts per year class. So we're back up pretty high to where we were kind of back at the start of this time series. And a lot of that's driven by the variability in wild recruitment. So if I take those stock fish off of this figure, what I see with my eye is kind of 3 major time periods. So we have this 7-year classes where it's about 6 to 8 million wild fish. In 2013, there was a major drought in the fall for about half the lake. There were record low numbers returning up at Strawberry Creek. I think Root as well. You know, so
It was real low.
real low spawning
They were
numbers.
shocking that year. Those
Yeah.
years a lot.
Yeah, it was bad. And then on top of that, I remember that winter very well because I lived in Wisconsin my whole life up until 2011. Then I spent a few years working in Maryland. We moved back in May of 2014 to what looked like February. I mean, it was that year of the 50-day polar vortex. It delayed, in terms of the context here, it likely delayed the emergence of some of those early food sources for smolts as they're exiting out. So between those two factors, that's why we think we had this event where we had this historically weak year class. And then, you know, those are going to contribute to the next parental stock. Chinook salmon, we typically see them spawning at H2 and H3. And I know this came out in the Facebook post. So when I say H2 or 3, it's the same as you talk about your kid. So if your kid is 2 years and 10 months old, they're 2 years old, right? So that's how we're talking about the fish here. They're in their 3rd and 4th year when they come back to spawn. But that affected the recruitment here for the next several year classes. And then for whatever reason, we have hit this kind of an inflection point. And we're back in kind of a very similar wild production level as we saw prior to that 2013 event. So that's kind of what we're looking at for Chinook salmon production. If we go back to this slide, which again, these are the pie charts of stocked fish that were caught here in Racine, Kenosha, North Point, and Waukegan, you might notice the wild fish were on this initial figure. If I put them in now, you can see how important those wild fish are to the fishery. About 2/3 of the fish lake-wide are of wild origin, and we see that here in Wisconsin until September, October, and that's because most of those fish are going back to Michigan. In fact, I can summarize that with this figure. This is showing trends for the entire Wisconsin coastline. We see fish that are stocked in the same area as they were caught is about less than 10% until we get to late August, and then by the time we get to September, it's very high. In Wisconsin, we see those wild fish come back down. But if we compare that to Michigan, this is wild Chinook salmon in Wisconsin versus Michigan. You see the patterns are polar opposites. That's telling us those fish are going back to Michigan. Now this is a percentage-based figure, but the next figure is based on actual relative abundance data, catch per effort of fish in the fall. Basically, the redder the color, the more catch of wild Chinook salmon we see in the fall. So we are, based on these data, suggesting that this section of Michigan is the primary producer of wild Chinook salmon.
Up by Manistee.
Manistee and Frankfurt.
Yep. Big Point Stobble.
Point Stobble, yeah. I also mentioned that we were able to look at kind of survival rates based on those tags. So we look at our relative abundance data, like how many fish we're capturing, and then we correct that for the number of fish stocked. And that gives us an indicator of relative survival, which, for whatever reason, fish stock in Wisconsin do really well. And so a couple of hypotheses there. In Wisconsin, we have colder water temperatures. That's because the jet stream is primarily going this way. That pushes all the warm surface water to Michigan.
Not anymore.
Yeah, not anymore, but you know, in general.
Not for 5 years anyhow.
It has been windy.
It's been 5 years of hell.
Yeah. Well, and I should say, so the last time we did the Chinook salmons, we did Chinook salmon tagging from 2011 to 2016. Then we just did clipping, so we continue to monitor the wild production rate because that's really important for that PPR model. Now we're back to tagging. So we're going to do a fresh analysis from the 2025 through 2029 year classes of Chinook salmon and see if anything's changed.
The fish are there, but we've had to go way offshore.
Yeah, okay. I believe. But these data were 10 years ago, so maybe it was different. Can't believe it's been that long. But based on these data, yeah, so we thought maybe temperature. It also might be forage. So those same processes, we have more rocks over here, less rocks in Michigan. Rocks are good habitat for invertebrates. Invertebrates are good food for a Chinook before it's big enough to eat fish. Some of our low survival areas, we had really low survival for fish stock in Green Bay and really low survival for fish stock in MM6. Those are these areas here, and those are likely
Green Bay's
temperature and predation.
Yeah, Green Bay dead zone too, oxygen wise.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of oxygen. It's warm, and there's a ton of walleye and cormorants. So
Right.
that's everything's going against it. And for MM6, what we think is going on for most stocking locations, those fish are stocked really close to the lake. Well, Michigan's egg tank facility is on a little Manistee River, about 9 miles upstream from the lake, and that's where they put a lot of those fish. So they have to swim 9 miles downstream and then through a drowned river mouth that has lots of predators in it to get out to the lake. So we think that's likely why there's low survival for fish stocked there as well. We did also see a general decline in the survival of stocked fish from 2011 to 2016. This is that same time frame when we had stocking reductions because there wasn't a lot of food out there. So that might be why we saw reduced survival of these stocked fish as well. And again, we'll see how that has changed now that we are looking at this again with fresh fish. So before I move on to lake trout, I'll pause and just see if there's any more questions about kings. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it seemed like the wild fish, they put more emphasis on that in the last 10 years about the wild fish being a lot of return coming, but your graphs went all the way down to like 2005. So it showed that you were getting wild fish way back then.
Yes.
So you've been studying that, but it seems like the big push has been the last 10 years. That wild fish has been brought up by the DNR.
Yeah, so I think, our program started a little more than 10 years ago, and it was one of the first main things that we talked about because there was a lot of surprise about how many Chinook salmon were wild. But it has been looked at since the inception of stocking. There is a figure buried somewhere that I can pull out that actually shows the estimated wild improvement levels in the late 60s, which were pretty much zero, all the way through today. And so, there was a progression. And by the time we started this with the 25-year class, as you said, the 2005 year class did have a fair number of fish. We were already probably at 60%. Yeah. All right. So moving on to lake trout, I'll try to, there's a few, I know I have some detailed slides in here that I can try to scooch over. Basically, we're looking at trends in relative abundance of fish, of wild lake trout. We do this for all of our management units. That's the kind of little gray lines that you kind of can see here. And to just kind of summarize the data, I've lumped them together into Southern Lake Michigan, which is always going to be dark blue, Northern Lake Michigan, which is light blue, and Lake Huron, which is orange. This is all wild lake trout, so we can see Lake Huron has had a bit of progress in terms of the amount of wild lake trout we're seeing there. We've seen a slow but steady increase in the number of wild fish here in Southern Lake Michigan, pretty much bupkis in Northern Lake Michigan until very recently, and we'll see if that sticks. So some of the challenges here with wild lake trout abundance, alewife are a main predator of the juveniles, and there's early mortality syndrome when lake trout eat too many alewife. Alewife are fairly low right now in terms of their abundance. That's likely a main driver of why we're now seeing this increase in wild lake trout. In Northern Lake Michigan, there's more sea lamprey. There's also a commercial fishery that limits the amount of spawning stock. The lake trout are a long-lived fish, as we started off talking about. They don't start spawning until they're 7-8 years old. And the older fish do produce more eggs as well. So by limiting, up in northern Lake Michigan, that harvest has kind of contributed to limited wild recruitment there as well until very recently. One thing we can do, and unless folks really care about Lake Huron and northern Lake Michigan, I can skip right to southern Lake Michigan in the interest of time. All right, well, if someone wants me to go back, let me know. Southern Lake Michigan, so here we're looking at hatchery versus wild. And then total is in black. And so this wild lake trout, that's the same that was dark blue in the earlier figure. And we can see that contrasted with the hatchery lake trout. So what's interesting here is through the beginning of this time series, your total lake trout harvest really mirrored hatchery lake trout. But then there were a bunch of cuts to lake trout stocking in this area. And right now, lake trout are not stocked in Wisconsin waters except for the mid-lake refuge out here. So as a result of that, we've seen this decline here in catch of hatchery lake trout. And now that total number is more affected by the wilds. One thing we used to talk about is the percent wild lake trout. We don't do that anymore because the percent is going to be based on both the wild and the hatchery numbers. And it was providing kind of a misleading idea of how rapidly great lake trout were producing. So these are the same data. I've actually put the percent wild in purple, and you can kind of see that looks like a very steep increase because, yeah, hey, we're more than half wild now. Part of that's because we have more wild lake trout, but part of that's because we have a lot less hatchery lake trout as well. And just to kind of show you where this is coming from, this is a figure showing the number of lake trout stocked by year class. We typically see the most lake trout caught at age like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So if we take that hatchery trend and apply it here, but do a time lapse to 5 to 10 years prior, we get this, and you can see that our trend in hatchery catch is mirroring this decline in stocked fish over that same time period. So stock fewer lake trout, you're going to catch fewer stocked lake trout. That makes sense. And as a result of that, we're now tracking wild fish based on relative abundance and not a percent. This is showing lake trout in the same area, Racine, Kenosha, Waukegan, and Winthrop Harbor. That's highlighted in the lake here in pink. And the trends largely mirror what we see for southern Lake Michigan as a whole. And part of that is because the main areas for wild lake trout production in the lake are Julian's Reef and Waukegan Reef, kind of these northern Illinois reefs, and then the Mid-Lake Reef complex, otherwise known as the Southern Refuge, which is out here. That's where we think we see most of the wild production coming from. That's part of why we see a lot of wild fish here in this part of the lake. Some other things we've learned about lake trout. So they don't move nearly as far as kings do. So this is an example. If we look at all stocking locations, we see that about 70 or 80% of lake trout are caught within 60 miles of where they were stocked. So that's kind of the rule of thumb up here. These fish were all stocked in WIM, but what scientists were creative folks. So Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, it's WIM, right? Yeah, we could come up with some better names for this, but nonetheless, all these lake trout were stocked in this kind of pinky purple area of the lake. The circles are proportional in the size of the catch. You can see they're more or less being caught very close to where they're stocked. The main difference is when we stock these fish offshore, these offshore refuges are providing sources for nearshore fisheries. All the red dots are fish stocked in the Southern Refuge, which is this kind of polygon here. All the blue dots are fish stocked in Northern Refuge. And so we can see that between these two refuges, they're supporting a lot of lake trout catch throughout the lake. But those biggest circles remain in the refuge. So that also shows that a portion of those fish are staying offshore and remaining there where they're receiving protection from harvest. Generally speaking, I guess I don't know about the north, but offshore here, the diets are a little bit different. There's not as many alewife, I don't think, way out on the refuge. There's some, but so we do see some differences there. And part of this here is there's also a unique strain that's stocked in the Southern Refuge called the Klondike strain. This is a different morphotype than most of the lake trout. So when I talk about morphotypes, if you're familiar with Lake Superior, you have your fat and your lean lake trout, right? Those are two different morphs. Most of the lake trout stocked in Lake Michigan are leads. These humpers are a strain that pretty much stays on the reef that they call home. And they're much smaller fish. And so that's what was stocked out on that reef for most from 2011 to 2019. They're not stocked out there anymore, and that's because there was a virus in the hatchery that killed them. which sucks. We don't have the brood stock. But they do appear to be reproducing because we are seeing lots of klondikes out in that area. Looking at lake trout relative survival, take-home message here is those offshore stockfish are doing better per capita than nearshore. Cooler tones are offshore, warmer tones are nearshore. So even when we were stocking lake trout in this area, they were not really surviving very well for whatever reason. And as I mentioned, now there is no more stocking in that area. But Julian's Reef and Southern Refuge, we see a lot of survival for those hatchery fish, and that's also where we see a lot of the wild production. In terms of what you're catching here, you're seeing about half the lake trout you land here are wild, so that corresponds with what we see, in the trend lines. You're getting a lot of those stockfish from Julian's Reef and Southern Refuge. A handful, I'm calling them old stocked. They, prior to our program in 2010, there was a chunk of time where they were just doing rotational fin clips on these lake trout. So we know they're stocked, but we don't know where. Those are what I'm calling old stock. Then there's a handful that were stocked lake-wide that pretty much don't even matter here. You have fish stocked near from Wisconsin, and then the fish from Michigan, these fish are not really crossing the pond at all. So in Wisconsin, you're not really catching Michigan fish. You're catching offshore fish and wild fish. So that's what I have for lake trout. I'll pause to see if there's questions there.
We, as a club, are taking note of the prospective increase in commercial fishing to try to expand the lake trout. Doesn't look like the numbers have really recovered.
My opinion is no, the numbers have not really recovered. The numbers are, I mean, there's progress. There's undoubtedly progress. Things are trending the way we want them to trend. But if you look at, the lake committees, we have a series of benchmarks, and for wild lake trout, we're hitting maybe half of them, without getting into too many details. So by those benchmarks, also, we wouldn't say we have a recovered lake trout population.
Thank you.
We would say mid-recovery. So, yes, sir.
As a club, we have a concern that if they got going with this and they took a lot of fish that they would be taking, we could potentially close the season down on lake trout. That's one of our main concerns. If there's an abundance of too much lake trout taking with nets.
Yeah. I can see why that would be a concern, because I think my understanding is, they're talking about a certain allocation of harvest, and that if this were to go into effect, it'd be allocated amongst the commercial and the sport fishing. So
that's one of our big concerns.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I can say when they started contemplating this rule change 2 years ago, I mean, we have a very good relationship with DNR. I was invited, I gave an hour-long talk only on lake trout to the group that was considering this rule change. I've talked about it, we've talked about it a lot. So they're aware of all these data. And but there are other factors at play as well. I think you have a legitimate concern. I know the commercials have concerns as well, where they want to be able to catch more fish. So we don't have a position on that.
No, but you have a truth on it. And we appreciate that.
The big concern is we pay for the hatcheries and that's through our stamps, everything else. They don't pay into it.
But they pay lobbyists.
That's our big concern,
Yeah.
I think he gets it. It's just not his fight.
Yeah. I get it. I'm just I can show you our data, and I can say I don't think the population's recovered, but we don't have a position other than all of this is openly shared with our partners in the state, and the decision on whether or not there'll be a fishery will not be solely based on biology, as it is for any decision.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
Well, the tribe gets say in that also, right? The tribal has a say in how much fish are stocked.
Yes, so I can say so because of the treaty obligations with the tribe, right?
Right,
So
and that's one of the biggest things that I think all fishing organizations on this side miss, is how much power the tribe will actually have in the state on
Yeah.
that stock.
yes, well, and in part that is
Half of this wouldn't even be federally funded if it wasn't for the treaty rights.
that's likely. Yes, and in fact, so the collapse of lake trout led to the development of lake trout hatcheries, right? So that was kind of the start of this. But you know, predominantly when the tribal fisheries really started getting going, they were targeting whitefish, and
Right.
they were not targeting lake trout. But now whitefish are really not doing well.
No, they're not.
So more and more of that catch is lake trout, and we've
But I mean, predominantly it's on the Michigan side, but it still
It
affects
is.
Lake Michigan.
it does still affect Lake Michigan. But I know like the lake trout are reared in federal hatcheries, but the states and the tribes determine where they're stocked. And there was a shift, I think, in around 2010 where we started putting more fish in the kind of the northeast quadrant of Lake Michigan where those tribal fisheries are to help support that, because we as the federal government have trust responsibilities, you know, federal trust responsibilities obligated by those treaties with the tribes. So, yeah, that is a fair point. I don't know what level of discussion they're participating in with regards to the potential for a Wisconsin state commercial fishery. But I know it's a topic that comes up at these meetings a lot. I'm just not usually involved in those conversations. Anybody else on Lake Trout? All right, so steelhead, latest and greatest. So steelhead, the long story short is steelhead are a lot more like Chinook than they are like lake trout. That's not a surprise either because they are in the same genus, Oncorhynchus. So these steelhead, the overall percent wild values every year class, it's been between 32 and 50% wild. And that's actually been independently verified. So I mentioned those natal origin studies. There's one that's in prep where they looked at this and came up with, for that particular set of fish, about 40% of their observations from wild. So I always love it when you have a completely different method that basically tells you the same thing. It gives you a lot of confidence that what you're seeing is
Same rivers as the Kings.
Actually, yeah, yes and no. I think the preliminary results have actually shown some of those southern rivers in Michigan as well, but it is still Michigan primarily. So with regards to spolts, we did the same thing with steelhead as we've done with Chinook. Orange is stock, blue is wild. I actually had to verify these numbers. In Michigan, there was no egg take in 2020, and so that is why there were so many fewer fish stocked in 2020. But for whatever reason, wild production also went down and stayed down. So we kind of have these two time periods here, but the differences aren't nearly as much. So if we put this on the on a longer time scale, at the end of the day, it may not be a difference. But right now, we're looking at these 3-year classes at about 1.5 to 2 million wild fish, and these three have been less than 1 million. So take that for what you will. You can see though that the stocking numbers changed. In 2022, there were more steelhead stocked than previously. Movements, they are basically moving like kings. They're moving everywhere. So this is the example map here. These are steelhead stocked in Indiana, and this is where they're caught. Circle size proportional to catch. So those Indiana fish actually are the best surviving fish we've seen so far for steelhead, and they are caught lake wide. But we do see that for a lot of other stocking locations. The main difference we do see is that, unlike Chinook, only about a quarter of those Lake Huron steelhead are coming over to this lake based on our observations. And I think that's because steelhead have a more varied diet. You all probably agree. If you've caught steelhead, you see that they're often full of bugs. So when they can't find alewife, they'll eat bugs. Or they'll eat gobies, or they'll eat whatever they can find. Whereas kings, and to a lesser extent coho, pretty much are eating only alewife. Everybody likes to eat alewife. It's just whether or not you can find something else when you can't find alewife. Lake trout and brown trout have the most diverse diets. Chinook salmon has the least. But yeah, so as I was, maybe I do. So I was mentioning here, this is Indiana. I'm going to show you basically these same maps for fish stocked in Wisconsin. Here are your steelhead stocked in this area of Wisconsin and where they're caught. Wisconsin has a tag lot that's stocked in small tributaries throughout the entire coast. That's actually their best surviving tag lot. So that was actually kind of a surprise to everybody. We don't know exactly where the fish are coming from because it's like, oh, there's 10,000 fish here and 8,000 here and 7,000 here, and it's all in these little rivers. And then fish stock kind of more locally in Milwaukee, Root, Pike River. You can see those are being caught lake wide as well. Basically the same story for Michigan stock fish. I think you guys get it by now. I skipped a little too fast though, because the kind of take home we've kind of factored in for the states is who's catching who's steelhead, and basically everybody's catching everybody's steelhead. So these are fish that were caught in Illinois, caught in Indiana, caught in Wisconsin, caught in Michigan, and where they were stocked. And there's some variability, like you can see there's a lot of Indiana fish caught in Indiana, but by and large, you're seeing everybody catching everybody's steelhead. And it's proportional to how many fish are stocked. So this pie chart over here is the actual total stocking. You can see Indiana is performing a little bit better. Michigan maybe is a little bit under. Wisconsin's maybe a little bit under. Illinois is maybe a little bit under. But like more or less, fish are being caught in about the same numbers as they're being stocked, and they're being caught lake-wide. So aside from spawning runs, again, we don't have the numbers to back it up yet, but we believe steelhead are going to natal home just like kings. That's one of the next steps in terms of what we're going to be looking at. It's a little more complicated because they spawn at different times depending on their strain, but that is something we're going to be looking at. In terms of steelhead that you're landing in this area, this is the block of fish that were stocked in this area. So that's maybe about 15%. You're getting a lot of fish stocked in southern Michigan, Indiana, rest of Wisconsin, not so much from Lake Huron, northern Michigan. Survival is certainly playing a role here. Oh, and wild. If we add the wild fish in, you're getting about half of your steelhead here appear to be wild. Which, and again, if you want to know, just look for that adipose fin. If it's there, it's likely a wild fish. Now for 2020, it could be a 2020 stock fish. That we don't know unless we age the fish, which we do, which is why we can determine wild versus not. If we only look so this pie chart we only looked at the ages of fish that we knew for a fact were wild, right? So if a 3-year-old caught in 2023 was unclipped, we couldn't tell it was wild. This could have been one of those unclipped stockfish. Yeah, so I was going to start talking about survival. We do see differences in survival across the lake as well. I'm going to kind of gloss over all this. The key thing here, though, is in the next figure, we had to do some standardization because of 2020. Without getting into the details, an average of 0 is average. 0 is a value that represents average. Positive numbers are above. Negative numbers are below. So one of the first things we looked at is life stage. Yearlings do a lot better than fingerlings, and this is something that has been known, but was still, it was from like papers in the 70s and 80s. So states wanted to look at it again. This is what we found. On average, 2.5 times higher survival for yearlings compared to fingerlings. Another way of putting it, fingerlings are about 23% of the steelhead stocked and about 7% of the harvest. So that said, they are still stocking a lot of fingerlings, and a lot of that is because of hatchery logistics. They're stocked as fingerlings because they need to get other fish in those raceways, so they need to get out so they get stocked. Better to stock them than to not stock. So that's in part why we still see fingerlings being stocked. That's relative survival of fingerlings. They're pretty much all bad except for Indiana's Canadians. And then the real interesting stuff here is the yearlings. Most of the steelhead stocked are stocked as yearlings. We have 3 major groups: the blue group that's doing pretty well, the yellow group that's average, and the red group that's doing pretty poorly. If we take those colors and put them on a map, we get a much better visual of what's going on. So unlike Chinook salmon, we actually see steelhead surviving the best in Indiana and southern Michigan. Kind of mediocre survival for fish stocked in Wisconsin, and relatively low survival for this particular unit. And Green Bay is the same. Green Bay steelhead don't survive there either. Same factors.
For small trips, is Root River considered a small tributary? Or?
No, it's not.
Okay,
no, so this
only like Pike and Waukegan Ravine.
Yes. Yeah. So this bright yellow blob is pike and root.
Yep.
The Wisconsin small tribs are this blue box. So that's not reflected in the map if that's the entire coast.
Yeah.
So Wisconsin small tribs are doing great in terms of their survival. We just, it's not the major river. So it's not the Milwaukee, not the Root, not the Pike, not the Sheboygan, not the Manitowoc, not the Kewaunee. It's things like Hibbard's Creek in Will County.
Yeah, Waukegan Ravine and
right.
It's the other one down
like
there.
the Pigeon River.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know all the exact stocking locations off the top of my head.
Just interesting that those do so well.
Yeah, and I don't know. Part of what might be going on. This is purely speculative, but with steelhead, they sometimes stay in the rivers for a full year before they smolt down. And on top of that, the fish in Wisconsin, they're not substantially smaller, but they tend to be a little bit smaller when they're stocked. So one thing that might be happening is maybe there are more smolts in Wisconsin that are triggered to say, hey, we're going to spend the summer in this stream. And then it gets to be July and the stream sucks and they die in terms of the heat, you know? That's purely speculative, but that's one possibility. But in these small trips, perhaps, you know, the conditions are such that they're not ready. I mean, I really don't know that that's what's happening, but it's one possibility. There's also possibilities for hatchery effects, although if that was the case, we wouldn't expect to see a tag lot like that do really well. Yeah, it could be any number of things. And this could also change. I mean, this is the most of this data is from the 2017 through 19 year classes. We typically see steelhead coming back at age 2 through 4. So for the post-COVID year classes, we're going to be collecting data on those all the way through 2028. We're probably about halfway done with our data collection for this. So there is potential for this to change if there's substantial variation in survival by and then that's just offset with, this is stocking numbers for steelhead. If you Google Great Lakes Fish Stocking Database, it'll take you to the web page where you can toggle on and off all sorts of species and lakes and whatnot and basically generate these figures at the click of a button. So if you're curious about looking at stocking Great Lakes wide, that's the site to go to. We've tried to look at survival by genetic strain. So far, nothing is conclusive. For those who like to nerd out on stats, these are p-values. 0.07 and 0.08 are close to being a significant, what we'd call a statistically significant difference. So if we continue to have more data and the trends don't change, those numbers will go down. If the trends do change, then they would go up. Part of this is based on sample size. And in this case, we're looking at Skamania, Michigan winter strain. We're controlling for where they're stocked, so Indiana, mid-Michigan, southern Michigan. You can see in 2 of those 3 there is some difference, even though we're not calling that a significant difference. But that's really the only thing where we're even hinting at a difference in survival by strain. If we look at Wisconsin, Chambers Creek and Ganaraska, that's pretty much a wash so far. If we look at the other strains, so Wisconsin also stocks Skamanias and Arlees. In these units, pretty much a wash. So again, the reason we're doing it this way is that we're controlling for stocking location, as we know there's some differences from location. So not really any consistent differences between the 4 strains stocked in Wisconsin. So all states are depending on one another steelhead. You got poor survival for steelhead in Green Bay and kind of Algoma to Manitowoc. Good survival in Indiana, southern Michigan, and the Wisconsin small trips. No differences among strains so far. And that's what I have for steelhead. I do have this fun bonus section, but I'll pause to see if there's any questions about steelhead.
How much crap do your West Coast colleagues give you for calling them steelhead here in the Great Lakes?
Yeah, well, it's not as much as you think, but anglers give us a lot of crap about it. And they are 4 of the 5 strains that are stocked are steelhead strain. Arlee is an inland rainbow trout strain, but the others are all steelhead strains from the Pacific.
You just see all the threads and people from the West Coast just go bananas.
Triggered.
No, I know. But they behave like steelhead. They smolt out from the rivers into a large body of water and then return to those rivers to spawn, and they can do so more than once in their life. It's very
salt
simple.
water.
It's just not salt water. But yeah, no, there's what's in the name really.
Yeah, I get it. I just always laugh about it. I was just wondering how much you hear about it.
Yeah. Well,
Your
personally,
Oregon Fish and Wildlife people are like, oh, you can't call them.
well, what's interesting is so like we've always called them steelhead because they are, but on our data sheets they're abbreviated RBT. So go figure.
That was a random question. I was just curious.
No, that's a good one.
I was actually amazed how much Lake Erie is for rainbow trout.
Yeah, they have
It's quite a fishery for rainbow trout, and people don't even know that.
Yeah, it's well, so far it's a secret, right? Sort of. Just like the walleye spawning runs in Green Bay were like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Not anymore. All right, so some frequently asked questions. This is something that started when I gave this talk in Algoma a few months ago. The captain there said, hey, we got some specific questions we want to know, and actually it's been pretty good, well reviewed. So we'll see how you guys think. So one question we often get is when will fish spawn out and down? And this does vary by species. So this is a figure showing this for Chinook salmon. Black are mature fish that were assessed to be mature. Red are fish that were assessed to be immature, and this is the age in years. So you can see from our data, we are seeing mostly age 1, 2, and 3 fish, a small handful of age 4 fish. So again, in age 1, so age 0, that's a fish that was recently stocked. An age 1 fish is in its 2nd year, an age 2 fish is in its 3rd year. But we age them just like we would, like I said, like we age humans. So for Chinook, yeah, by age 3, most of them are out. For steelhead, because they can spawn more than once in their life, steelhead, that's the main difference between them and Chinook. One of the main differences, anyway. Chinook, when they spawn, they're done. Steelhead, they have the capacity to spawn multiple times, and so we do see potentially older fish. We've actually seen a tagged fish from a small pilot study in Michigan that was 10 years old. Wow. So we know that was a 10-year-old steelhead.
That had to be a chunk.
Yeah. You can see we do see commonly 7s, 6s, a lot of 5s, but mostly we're looking at those 2 to 4-year-old fish. So that's kind of your bread and butter fish.
2 to 4 years, are they dying at that point, or are they coming back to spawn again? That I guess I'm just looking at the way this is put together. Fish spawn and die.
Mm-hmm.
They spawn at 2. Do they die at 2, or do they come back and spawn again? Maybe at 3 and 4, and then die at 5 or something.
Yeah, it's going to depend on the fish and likely the resources that fish is experiencing.
It says steelhead can spawn multiple times.
They can. That doesn't mean that they do, though, right? So at some point, like some fish are going to spawn and die because of the exhaustion of it. But if you have a really fit fish that's had a good year and it's going into those streams really strong, it'll probably survive and come back. But like anything, the older you get, the more fish you have drop out from being caught by anglers or from natural causes. And so that's why we see this decline. I mean, that's what you're going to expect. But I still think it's pretty cool that we've seen up to 10 and more commonly up to 7.
I couldn't believe that would even happen.
Yeah. And then lake trout are long-lived. There's been documentation of 70-year-old lake trout up in Canada. It can depend on the environment. Here in the Great Lakes, we have a fishery, so we don't see as many older fish, but you can see we do see a lot of older fish. I mean, compared to Chinook, which would be age 3, and steelhead, which max would be age 10, we see all these fish that are in their teens, 20s, and then here's that 39-year-old that has now been all over the place on the internet recently. So the thing about lake trout is, like I said, they mature around age 6 and 7. These older fish are the ones that are going to produce most of the babies. Once they reach kind of 10, 11, 12 years old, they don't eat as much. They stop growing. All the resources are going towards their reproduction. So, and we're going to see that in the next section, which is, can I tell a fish's age from its length? Right? This is pretty common. And for kings, I can actually give you some pretty reasonable rules, generalities here. So most fish that are 10 inches or less are age 0. Most kings 11 to 22 are going to be 1-year-olds. Most kings that are 23 to 31 could be 2-year-olds. Most of those 32 and larger are age 3. When I say most, I define that as more than 50%. So to give you some example, there is some overlap in marginal lengths. If we look at 31 to 32 inches, where I say most 31s are age 2, most 32s are age 3. So if we look at this bin from 31 to 32 inches, 55% of those were 2 and 43% were 3. So, I mean, yeah, it's most, but more accurately, that's kind of a toss, right? But Chinook are going to be the easiest to kind of ballpark their age from their thing. Once we get to steelhead, one thing that the steelhead depend on, the different strains have different growth rates. And this is part of why, part of why we call our data preliminary. When we first started talking about steelhead survival, our preliminary data was in 2019. It was 2-year-old fish in the first year class, and we saw nothing from Wisconsin. And everyone was freaking out. But the main thing is Wisconsin stocks a lot of Ganarascas, and at age 2, Ganarascas were only about 18 inches. So there weren't a lot of Ganarascas caught. By the time we got to the next year, Wisconsin had caught back up. So that's an important consideration here. You're looking at variability from 18 inches for Ganaraska up to an average of 23 inches for Skamania at age 2. So that's, again, part of why for Chinook, we do the wild estimates at age 2. For steelhead, we're doing it at age 3 when everything's kind of caught up with regards to their length. And everything is in this length bin, which is very commonly caught out there by yourselves and other anglers. Steelhead length at age is going to vary considerably, especially when strain is unknown. So if you go out and you catch steelhead, there's no way you're going to know what strain it is. The only way we can tell, well, you can do it by genetics, but primarily is if it's a stocked fish, the tag tells us it's genetics. So if we look at everything in one bin, regardless of strain, here's an example. So steelhead that were 29 to 30 inches, we had 1% were H2s, 19% were H3s, 38 were 4s, 24 were 5s, 13 were 6s, and 4 were 7 and under. So you get a real big mixed bag there. You can't really tell, but generally speaking, you know, for these smaller lengths we can, 15 inches and less, you're looking at mostly H1 fish. 16 to 23 are mostly H2. 24 and 26 are H2 to 4 years, and then you get H3 to 4 mostly for these larger steelhead. Once you get to really large fish, you're looking at those fish. So I don't know offhand. I should look at our data because I want to know how big that 10-year-old is now.
Yeah.
It was probably, like you say, a nice donkey of a steelhead. So with lake trout, all bets are off, and this is because the body size growth is slow and pretty much minimal after they reach maturity. So, for example, within this 29 to 30 inch bin from known age-coded wire-tagged fish, this isn't, there's, no aging estimate. We have some H4s and some H30s. All in that 29 to 30 inch bin for lake trout, right? So it's absolutely crazy. And that's because, hey, that 30-year-old, it reached maturity, and it's like, okay, I'm going to cruise around and eat just enough to produce eggs every year, or sperm, or whatever. I don't know if that's a male or female at 30, but, yeah, that's their life strategy. That keeps them around so long. Generally speaking, I did try my best to do this. So lake trout, 16 to 19 inches, were mostly 3 to 5 years old. So you're seeing a much slower growth rate there compared to your salmon. 20 to 25 inches are mostly 4 to 7 years old. And really, I couldn't do any of this over 26 inches. Our oldest observation at 26 inches was a 20-year-old fish. So, that's fish like this. So, yeah, who knows with lake trout. Anyway, that's what I got for you today. Thank you for bearing with me. I tried to go fast, but
Oh, that's awesome.
So
Yeah.
Let's feel bad. I know you're driving.
Yeah, exactly.
happy to be here.
I got one
Yes, sir.
question. You mentioned Green Bay, and my favorite bird to hate, the cormorants.
Uh-huh.
Are they doing anything to control the population of those things?
I believe that.
I know you can't shoot them, even though we'd like to.
Well, I think that actually might have recently changed. I mean,
Lock and load.
I don't think I don't know about the general public. I think there has been
Oh, come on.
targeted removals of cormorants in certain areas. I think migratory birds has gotten on board with that in some limited circumstances. But no, you can't go out in your backyard and start shooting cormorants. I didn't mean to imply that.
we have the machine fight out here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
Years ago, there was never a cormorant on here. Now it's
That's all it is.
Uh-huh.
It's a roost.
It's a roost.
Yeah.
No,
It's my
You go by
favorite
it,
spot.
Up they go.
Because of the smell?
I like to take my daughter through there to go downwind.
Yep.
yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. I was born in 1983, so in the 90s, it was like my parents, oh, look, a cormorant. Everyone got excited to pull up the binoculars, and now they're everywhere. They're like pigeons. So, I
They've
agree.
destroyed habitat all over.
Yeah. Islands of Green Bay.
They are a problem in a lot of areas.
Are they invasive?
No.
Just dominant.
And they are, and yes, they eat stocked fish, but they are indiscriminate in their eating. They eat a lot of alewife and gobies and perch too. So
They eat everything.
yeah. Well, if you're a bird and you're hungry, right?
I was just wondering, just curious if they're going to target them things to knock the population.
They were working on the eggs at one point, weren't they? Where they were doing something and they would reproduce,
Yeah.
I believe.
It's it's unfortunately it's not really my area of expertise, but I get that question a lot, so I'm going to have to bone up on that so I can be better at answering these questions. I think there are some discussions about doing some control management, but I don't know to what extent or.
I think they disperse a lot of mercury, so if you want to get a couple hundred, we can drop them off for testing.
That's a good point, Jim. I'm sure that they're low.
Yeah. They keep
Thank
eating
you.
our salmon salt.
Anyway,
Thank you both of you guys. for
Yeah,
coming.
thank you both.
Appreciate you coming.
I'll just mention I have some handouts and a business card in the back. I don't bite. If folks have questions, you can drop me an email. If you want to hand out a ticket, you don't leave it there. Doesn't matter.
No, I was
They're
gonna
there
say,
if you want.
yeah, don't
So,
go. I got like 4 slides, and then if they can hit you up for more stuff, they
Yeah,
will.
I will. I'll hang around until everyone's done with me. All right.
Thanks again. All right. Little fun. I just thought I'd bring this up, but Officer Robakowski up in Milwaukee. That is a SEI drive with a hole about that big in the side of it. He was coming in yesterday after fishing with his son, and who said they? Oh, you're talking to your downrigger. Heard a loud bang. So did he.
You see Emily? I sent Emily to you.
Uh,
The sheriff department got a new.
oh yeah. Shoot, I didn't get that up here.
Gonna get it up.
Yeah, Jim sent me this earlier today while I was at work. I had to sit at a table at a golf outing. I didn't even get to golf. But they have this new like RC rescue device, which looks like an orange torpedo. They drop this thing in the water and it's like.
It's got handles on it to save people.
I'll get that video up on the site somehow. That was really cool. But yeah,
Actually, I shared it to Salmon Unlimited.
you already did?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, it's an awesome little device. Of course, somebody had the first comment, oh, you could have done that with a cheap RC boat. It's like, no, it's a rescue device. So,
That person did that with a downrigger ball that fell in the cradle or something and smashed it. How'd they get the hole in the side of their?
no, he was running in from fishing in Milwaukee. He's at Skipper Bud's up there.
What did he hit? Or did
No.
he blew up the lower unit?
Just
and it blew up the other
nuked
way?
on the run
He-
back.
Okay, I thought maybe he hit something.
No,
So-
I told him, I said, my theory, I said, if you want to cut it open after, we're waiting to hear because it was SEI. But if it's out of warranty, but it's only like a year past, so he's hoping, sob story.
Yeah.
But if not, I want to cut it open and see if one of the teeth of the gear busted off and then got caught between the outer casing and the drive gear. So, because it's right at, I don't know if it shows in the picture well, but it's right where the 2 lower gears mate. And I'm guessing it just got caught in between the outside of the housing, but he said he just heard a loud bang, and then all of a sudden, it sounded like he thought his engine blew.
Okay.
So he was thrilled because I just gave Kyle Kenya a lower half of a lower unit I rebuilt, but because I got the boat with the Bravo drive now, I had no use for it. So I told Kyle, I'm like, here, keep it as a backup and put it in his dock box. And then like 2 days later, this happens. I'm like, Kyle, can I get that back? So,
No, I blew my lower unit and it shook the whole boat.
he said he thought the engine blew up. Our scout troop, we are the charter org for Troop 129. Last year we had an outing for some of the scouts that came out and volunteered at Salmonorama. They asked if we'd be open to doing one just in general for the scouts. And at our board meeting, I had 3 or 4 other volunteers, but we're looking for like 2 or 3 more boats to take out some of the scouts from Troop 129 on Saturday, June 28th. So if any of you have interest, hunting for 2 or 3 more volunteer boats to bring out scouts. We just put the email out to the scouts, so once we get the number, I'll be able to refine more on the boats. But just trying to keep a ready stack. I'm guessing we'll need 4 or 5 at most, but depending on the number of scouts that sign up. Upcoming events, membership meeting, July 9th. All hands on deck. Same thing, we need the volunteers at the event. We need the volunteers the night to set up. Jim's probably going to be down there. What time are you going to get there on Wednesday, once we have access?
4 o'clock, 5 o'clock.
Okay, so you'll be down a couple hours before normal. So feel free to come down then. I've got the kids' fishing pond. We got a ton of stuff that we've got to move in. We've got storage at the site. The garage under the old Johnson Pike drive-through is basically going to be ours to use for storage for the Salmonorama for this year. Kick off the Friday night, or the tournament starts the next day, and then jackpot series. I don't know what's on the bottom. I think Weird Day might be the last thing on there. That's all I got, unless anybody else has an announcement. Oh, there was one other announcement. I promised. Do you remember that guy's name? Somebody lost a component
For auto. For his,
for like an autopilot remote,
remote control.
and he was down at like during our jackpot event. So, yeah, did anybody happen to find like an autopilot cordless remote? Sounds like he thinks he lost it around the fish cleaning station on Saturday, and so I told him I'd bring it up to the members to see if anybody recovered it. if nobody knows.
Maybe some talk to Caleb, maybe it shows up there.
Yeah, I can let Caleb know, but if nobody here knows what it, anything about it, then clearly not likely that we have it. So
Maybe Dale had it.
over. So hey, from what I heard, they did not sink at jackpot at the second event, so the adjustment was made.
They did rather well.
Yeah.
He actually did 5th place.
Did he? That's
which is
great to
pretty
hear. Lily and I went up to Fishing Has No Boundaries. That was a great event for any of you that had heard about that. But there's a organization called Fishing Has No Boundaries. They take out disabled people. It's everything from cognitive to physically disabled kids, all the way to vets. Last 2 years prior to this year, Lily and I had a Marine who had lost a hand to like an IED, and so he had a hook on him. And we've had a couple other individuals this year. That guy wasn't, he didn't come out and participate, but we had a different guest, 2 actually. But it's just a fun event. So unfortunately this year it fell in the jackpot, but I'd love to see more of our boats come up.
How'd you do in Milwaukee? It was a struggle here.
Oh, sucked. There was we went 1 for 2, and we were like, when we saw the counts of fish caught, we were like, oh, we didn't do that bad. There were a couple boats got skunked, and this is a volunteer event for these individuals, the participants. That's like, wow, that was pretty tough. So I can only imagine what it was like here.
It was tough. It was a long time.
Yeah. So that's it. Thank you all.
Thanks again, John and Matt.
Yes. Yeah. Hit them up. They're still here. Tuesday. PBA is always Tuesday. Yeah. We need, I think we do need a few extra people for help on that.
I'm gonna be in there for that.
Oh, perfect.
I'll be waiting. But I float around too. Last year I showed up 3 or 4 because I don't fish anymore.
Yeah.
I just come out though.
Yeah, it'd be
So I might
appreciated.
not sign up for other ways. But
Yep. Yeah. Well, that's it. If I could get everyone to do one commitment, and then you come in on random on top of that,
yeah, I can stand there the whole time.
Yeah, like, gosh, if we just, the poor thing is that a lot of guys are like, well, I'll come down and you know, well, great, that doesn't help us plan. That's why you told me on everybody. Thank you, pleasure. Thanks for coming out. What'd you think? I'll get this eventually sorted off my drive, and then I'll put it on YouTube, and then I'll reshare it on the same internet.
So we can so we can sell it out. Give them one more line.
All right, appreciate it. Yeah, do you have Jim? Well, you can always contact me. Jim, the calendar schedule for.
Yeah.
Just seeing how your group stands and everything like that. It's your body.
They're all set up.
We really haven't had anybody in here for a long time. Probably 20 years.
Yeah, let's shoot for next week.
Yeah, well, happy to be.
Harbor Festival's all set up.
Yeah.
It is. Bye.
I went down to 10.
That one's 10, the other one's 5.
Yeah, I know. We can't ever sell anything, so I'm saying let's just change it to 5.
Oh, I see that.
Give them one more each.
Right, double 'em up.
And we'll just sell it real quick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
He does a lot of muscle. I did like him and his son. His son used to work on base car.
Yeah, I told Lily we love your but we missed that boat because it was ours. We made everything kind of fit for her and I. Oh yeah, that's bad. Yeah. The new boat we have is like a twin. Even though it's a smaller boat.
For the box of flags, $1.
Yeah.
Yeah, custom creation gift card store.
That's what I lost.
$5.
Yeah, I'm just curious what the gift card is.
Going on, buddy.
Just to sell it.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see some of those.
Right.
Yeah, we should.
And I'm not the elevator.
I actually have people that are looking for that.
No.
Yeah.
I got people that, yeah, I can. I did want to tear it down. But I have no idea.
Right, right.
Like I said, it poured out of my truck and even in the shed sitting upright. It's actually.
Yeah, I know.
Good job.
I couldn't have this. All right, I'm out of here. I joined, and I got on the go since.